Good evening. We're going to call this meeting to order at 5 p.m. And we are going to start number 2, opening exercises, 2.1, moment of silence, and 2.2, pledge of allegiance, and the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. I would like to have Ms. Janelle Bowles do this, as she's the one that requested we have the Declaration of Independence. So Janelle, go ahead and lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Thank you, Mrs. Bowles. Moving on to number 3, discussion items. 3.1, Transportation Department update. Mr. Kevin Molino, I will let you take over. Thank you.
President Rooks, members of the governing board, Dr. Summers, cabinet, and guests. Mr. Simpson and I will be providing the board with an update on the transportation services that the district provides. The update will consist of an overview of the transportation department, the challenges it is facing, and the ongoing efforts to enhance our service levels. Before we start, there are a few definitions that we need to cover to ensure we have clarity and just answer questions as we go, so we're all understanding what the key words that we're talking about. Commercial driver's license, that is the driver's license needed to drive a school bus in Arizona with a school bus endorsement. When we refer to a run is a list of stops for student pickup and drop-off for an individual school. A route is what one bus is scheduled to do every day, and all the runs assigned to a bus and driver equals one route. A tier is general time slots in which a bus shifts from one run to another. We have a 3-tier system, and most buses have 3 runs to perform in each AM and PM. The mornings, 7:20 AM, 8 o'clock, 8:40 AM are the 3 morning tiers, and then the afternoons are 2:20, 3 o'clock, 3:40. Ridership, that's the number of students who ride the school bus. And then governing board policy section EE, transportation services. And then more specifically, policy EEAA, walkers and riders. The reason this one's key This is the policy that authorizes the district to provide transportation services to students to and from school. There are 3 legal requirements that I want to make sure that the board is aware. Arizona Revised Statute 15341, especially paragraph 12. It is to provide transportation or site transportation loading and unloading areas for any child or children if deemed for the best interests of the district, whether within or without the district, county, or state. And then Arizona Revised Statute 15764, paragraph 4, provide necessary specialized transportation in connection with any educational program, class, or service as required by the pupil's IEP. And then finally, the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. We'll be providing an overview of the department, the challenges it has been facing, and recommendations for possible next steps, then providing the governing board the opportunity to ask questions. This slide shows you the current employees that we have on the left column. A transportation department typically consists of bus drivers, substitute bus drivers, bus assistants, van drivers, mechanics, bus driver trainees, and office staff. The office staff consists of dispatch routers, supervisors, and clerical positions. On the right column, you can see the number of vacant positions as of last Friday. I'd like to clarify that the 26 bus driver trainee positions that you see listed are typically not counted in our staffing model. But when we pull a report out of our position control, they're listed in there. And these are just as we get new applicants, and we're putting them through training so they can get their CDL. So this is where they sit until they fill the permanent bus driver position. Over the past 5 years, we have consistently struggled to fill bus driver, bus assistant, van driver, and mechanic positions. Our fleet consists of yellow buses, both regular and special education, activity buses, and white fleet, which are cars, trucks, and vans. Our yellow buses have cameras, GPS, and ridership card readers, and then the GPS hardware that interfaces with the parent portal app, which was released to the school last year. The industry recommended bus lifespan is 12 to 15 years, and we keep our buses between 15 to 17 years. Our buses average 18,000 miles per year, and we end up driving them for about 270 to 306,000 miles during their lifespan. Just like our personal cars, the older the fleet gets, the less reliable and less efficient it becomes. And during the next 8 years, in an optimal situation, we would expect to be replacing 72 of our buses. During the last fiscal year, our buses and McKinney-Vento vans were driven 2,140,450 miles, and our fleet uses on average 274 to 286,000 gallons of fuel, and that is both red diesel, clear diesel, and unleaded gasoline. We currently have 97 routes, which consists of 631 runs. We have 14 runs which provide services for out of district. This means we drive a student from inside our district to an outside placement school, or we pick up a student from outside our boundaries and drive them to one of our schools. We have 10,679 students, not including 12th graders, that are eligible for bus services and transportation, and that is based off policy EEAA. This school year, we started for the first time having parents register for transportation services, and we had 3,866 students register. On average, we transport 5,500 regular education students and 650 special education students on a daily basis. Over the past few years, due to the bus driver shortage, we have increased the amount of outsourced services. For athletic, field trips, and other events, our use of charter buses has increased, and along with that, the cost for charter buses. We have also increased our use of outside providers for special services, and we have outsourced some transportation services to outside placement schools if they have the capacity, and that's the column you see on the right side. We all know that over the past 5 years, there has been a national and state shortage of CDL drivers. This, in turn, based on supply and demand, has caused a market competition for their wages. We have not been able to fully staff our bus drivers since then. This has caused office staff, supervisors, mechanics, and the director to drive school buses and cover other duties as needed. And it has also caused drivers to have to do double runs and have late buses. All this has increased the stress and decreased morale within the department, along with the increased absences, which in turn adds more stress to other employees and then leads to the higher the stress, the lower the morale, leads to resignations. And then it's a spiral, just a spiral that really impacts not just the department, then the parents. With governing board approval, we have increased the hourly rate for CDL bus drivers and office staff that have CDLs twice, October 2021 to $17 an hour, and then July of 2023 to $19 an hour. During the 21-22 school year, if we did not have a driver to cover a route for any given day, we would cancel that route the morning of. And we would try at that point to give the parents about an hour's notice, so about 6 a.m. During the 22-23 school year, we canceled routes in advance, one academic quarter at a time, and then we rotated the routes that were canceled so that no route was canceled twice that school year. And this will give the parents the ability to plan ahead of time. In January of 2020, we had 122 routes, and since then we have merged and collapsed down to 97 routes. As we mentioned during a prior slide, we have increased the number of outsourced services, and we had also hired a consultant to do an assessment to help us find efficiencies. And this year, working with the Human Resource Department, we created a recruiter position within the HR department to help us be proactive in recruiting for hard-to-fill positions. During the fall of 2022, we hired a consultant to do a route efficiency study, a rezoning and boundary study, a facility study, and a school bell time study. We also contracted them to help us with recruiting during the spring of summer of 2023 as part of the campaign, transportation, human resources, public relations, and the consultant all worked together to help us advertise, recruit, and hire bus drivers that summer. We handed out in one of the attachments that you have paper copies of the summary report of the marketing campaign, which Ms. Aries' team provided and created after that campaign that summer. I think that every single person in this room right now, and especially sitting at these tables, we have the solution and we can come up with what it will take to correct this problem once and for all. I believe that we all want to increase the reliability of the services that we as a district provide to our parents, but to do that, we need to give this department the resources it needs to be successful, especially in a competitive market to fill positions. We also want to enhance student and driver safety and improve the workplace environment for staff. To do so, we need to attract and retain staff. We need to make changes to how the department is staffed and structured. We need to provide competitive compensation, and we need to improve staff attendance, hold them accountable if they're not showing up to work, and consider outsourcing additional routes that are difficult to fill and maintain. And these are things that need to happen soon. In that second phase, that's what I would target for next year, if you ask for my recommendation, and we would need to market and enforce ridership, implement student ID badges for ridership, consider changes to policy EEAA, and continue to make route changes to be more efficient based on the outcome of first phase. And then if we still need to, then outsource additional services next year. And then for the final third phase would be boundary changes and changes to school start and end times. And I know that the reason I leave changes to school start and end times, that's a difficult decision. A lot of districts, when the bus driver shortage happened nationwide, were at a 2-tier system. We're already at a 3-tier system. So to make changes to give us more than 40 minutes in between those runs really would have an impact. Let's say if you decide to take high schools to an earlier time, that means high school students are waking up earlier. That means elementary schools and buses are later on in the day. And then that also means that, and Mr. Sims can answer that question, the hours that we pay bus drivers for, that means those will increase throughout the day. And then there's limitations in DPS, how many hours they can drive and work throughout the day and week. And then there's just a lot of considerations for changing school start and end times, especially with athletics and other events. At this time, Mr. Sims and I stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Molino. We do have public comment tied to the slide item, so I wanted to make sure you had time to get through your presentation so that we can hear from our public comments. So you will have 3 minutes. I will call you up, microphone over there. And the first public comment is from Tara Willoughby. Did I pronounce it correct? Okay, thank you. Yes, yep, right at the mic, and you have 3 minutes. Oh, hold on, let him turn it on.
Sorry.
Okay. No, you're good.
Good evening, Dr. Summers, Mrs. Rooks, and the governing board, and everybody in attendance. I would like to say that we are working diligently at transportation. I'm here to support Mr. Sims. He has been wonderful. He has a great heart, and our number one job is to get those students to and from school. I've been in the district for now 30 years, and I'm very proud of our district. And I'm very proud of the work that Mr. Sims has put into it. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Moving on to Maurice Stevens.
Do I get extra time because she didn't use all her 3 minutes?
I'm sorry, she forfeited that, but you only get 3.
Mr. Summers, Governing Board, how's everybody doing? Why, it feels sad. So I'm going to bring a little bit of energy. My name is Reese Stevens. I am your foster care and McKinney-Vento liaison. I work for the students. Yes, I am the liaison for our district. What that liaison means is I'm a bridge between ADE and the LEA, Local Education Agency. Okay? McKinney-Vento was very passionate to me. Started in 1987 by Ronald Reagan that said, any student or family suffering from any type of homelessness is entitled to certain services. There are many faces to homelessness. You know, under a bridge, in a car, in a shelter. But there's more things to that. Now it's added is what we call doubled up. Multi-generational families under one roof. Now we're considering that homeless. It's not now we're considering it, it's just now being brought to our attention. After Reagan made it possible, Obama gave it some teeth. Obama gave it some funding. And so now we have some funding to provide the services, the many services to these homeless families. Why we're here today is because of transportation. That is the main resource that we give these families. McKinney-Vento families have the right to attend the school of origin, that's where it all began, or the district of residency. So this is where we get into cost, in the sharing of these costs. If we're doing shared transportation, we reach out to that other district and we ask them to share in the cost of transporting. Since I started here in 2019, our program has grown tremendously, and I have some numbers just in my head. 2019, we ended the program with 89 McKinney-Vento families. Not that many, but I knew we had more. The following year, we ended with 176 McKinney-Vento families. A little bit more, but I knew we had more. The following year, we finished with 250 McKinney-Vento families. You guys see what's happening here. We're growing. Last year, we finished with 350 McKinney-Vento families. Of these 350 families, 60% use transportation. 60%. Kids need to get to school, and we are here to help them do that. Our job is to eliminate the barrier, not create the barrier. For the last 2 years, I want to tip my cap to our transportation department because they have done a phenomenal job, given what you just seen on the screen.
I'm so sorry. The time's, I know. I'm
You
so
said I
sorry.
was going to get extra. McKinney-Vento is important. Transportation is important. We're doing the work, and we can continue to do the work. We just got to buy into it.
Thank you so much for your comment. Next, public comments comes from David Barron.
Good evening. Forgive me for reading, but it's the best way to keep me under time. I'm David Barron. Last month, I stopped being a district school bus driver, and I did that because I didn't want to risk my CDL anymore. School bus drivers here are from a very diverse group. A very large portion need health insurance for themselves and their families. Others are bolstering 401ks. The state retirement contributions allows drivers to supplement their Social Security when they retire. Others are rounding out the cost of living. All are subject to being coerced into accepting situations they should not have to. The bus drivers and assistants here have absolutely no representation in matters between the district and themselves. They're not represented by a union. There's no advocate in this building that's going to come to their defense if there's a problem. There's no peer counseling. There's no peer support if they have an issue. One of the big complaints is they try to reach out to people in this building. Nothing gets returned. One bus driver recently sent an email in. Never got an answer. I have 3 phone messages sitting in Dr. Summers' inbox. Never got answered 3 days in a row. So communication between the drivers and the district needs to improve. That's the first step. Recently, a question was asked at a recent board meeting, why so many people were taking days off. Now, I'm a retired firefighter, and we had something back then that was called the mental health day. And what that is you just have to get away from it. You got to get away from the feeling of fatigue, distress, the feeling of helplessness in trying to do your job and feel like you're pushing a boulder uphill. So you just need to take that day off, and I think that might account for a lot of these days. Some of the drivers don't feel valued as employees. Let's look at some examples. Every morning and afternoon they have purples hanging from their mailboxes. These are pieces of paper. They are double and triple notices that they now must manage along with their regular routes. Months on end of this stress leaves a mark. Every time another driver quits, just like happened last week, they know that their purples will get worse. Teachers get extra pay when they stay after school because the bus was running late. Nothing is offered to these bus drivers, nothing. On July 1st of 2024, the drivers were to have $1 an hour added to their base pay for driving field trips. It's published right now on the website. You can look and read it. Come July 1st, no information was offered from the district. Nothing came out of this building. It wasn't until August 21st that they held an informational meeting, but someone in staff decided to change it to only midday trips.
I'm sorry, Mr. David Barron, the time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. Next public comment comes from, I'm going to say Noe Androidi. I don't know if I'm Andretti. Sorry. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Noe Andrade. I'm the father of a child that was missing this week. On Monday, 27, my daughter was missing for an hour. Nobody knew the location of my daughter, and that's the reason why I'm here today. As a prior service member that served 20 years in the Air Force, accountability is key for me. And I expect accountability for my child from everybody, from the school teachers, from transportation, and from you guys. That was agonizing that time that I didn't know the location of my daughter. It was agonizing. A lot of thoughts went through my head that moment. My wife was working, she was going crazy. Imagine your child being lost, and the people that you trust, your child, don't know where she's at. When I was in the Air Force, anybody that I supported that was under me, I knew exactly where they were. That was my job. It was my duty. I expect this from you guys. I really do. I had a whole speech written. I got 3 minutes. It would take me longer to compliment the speech, but I gotta tell you something. I really expect action from you guys. school. I want an answer why my daughter was missing for 1 hour. And not only my daughter, there was also 6 other kids that were missing. I also want to commend Vistancia Elementary School principal and the vice principal, because during that process, they were very, very helpful. I'm not here to attack people. I'm here to find solutions. Okay? Mr. Sims, Mr. Tip, you guys were nice, and you immediately responded to my answer, so I want to thank you. And you guys took accountability. But accountability is not going to bring my daughter back if she's ever lost. Right? So I want to use my time as much as I can, 47 seconds. All right. So I want an answer for why my daughter's location was unknown for almost an hour, because I deserve it, and so those families that lost their child deserve it. So you guys lost trust on I lost trust on you guys, and so the other families that lost their kids for an hour. Granted, they were found, but for that hour, my kid was lost. My child was lost. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Thank you for your service as well. Next public comment comes from Joe Blair.
Good evening, folks. I'm Joe Blair. I'm one of your transportation drivers. I've been driving out of Peoria for over 5 years now, driving a school bus since 2008. I don't think anybody sitting on this board can deny that the department has been in a steady decline for the last 5 or 6 years. We had a director that became complacent in his position and was replaced. Unfortunately, when they replaced him with a gentleman that had absolutely no experience at all in transportation, further facilitating the decline. We can't retain drivers. The drivers we do get are gone shortly thereafter. Mr. Sims was hired to fix the problem. He is probably the most knowledgeable person I have ever met in the department for transportation. He is well connected. He deals with problems before they even hit. You know, what's happened in transportation, quite frankly, is the district's fault. Plain and simple. Pay. It's not rocket science, guys. It's retention. It's attraction. You can't retain and attract when you're the lowest priced or the lowest paid in the district or in the surrounding areas. We have drivers that come, they will leave and go to a neighboring district, typically because of more pay. If we can't attract them, we can't retain them. And we can't attract them because we're not paying what we need to be paid. We are not being paid what is commensurate with our responsibilities. We have to have medical training. We have to walk the bus every day, mechanical training, intervention in conflicts. It's a lot more than people think. Again, we are not paid as well as meter readers, as well as people that pick up our trash. Now, granted, that's a whole different department. And I am here because I choose to be here. I could go anywhere and drive with the CDL. I like doing what I do. Not only that, we work a split shift. We come in. We're there for 3 to 4 hours. Then guess what? We go home and come back 3 or 4 hours later. Now, come on. That's got to be worth something for retention. You know, it's frustrating out there. Mr. Sims is doing everything he can possibly do, but without the backing of the board, he can't move forward fast enough. I understand there's a substantial raise being discussed, and quite frankly, it shouldn't even have to be discussed. It should be automatic, guys. Look at the surrounding area. Pay us what we're worth. We don't need acclimates. I don't need to be told how great we are. Pay us to show us. Or better yet, tell us what's going to make us important to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your comment. All right, that is the end of public comments. board members, before I go to questions and comments, I just wanted to let you know, I called this special session today because of this issue, and hearing from the bus drivers, hearing the concerns there, and then also hearing the circumstance that happened at Asante Elementary. I just wanted to apologize to those families. That is, that was hard to hear as a mom myself, and I'm so sorry that happened. So that is why I called for this special meeting, because I felt that we needed to address this and work through and find a solution, because I've just seen so much of not getting anything done. And so I appreciate that you guys were able to make it today to this meeting, to have this conversation, so that we do not lose a student ever again. So I will go to Mr. Toby, since you're the farthest one over there, if you want to go for questions and comments.
Thank you again for the data. Again, I just have some more questions. I'm just wondering if my questions would be answered with Mr. Sims' presentation. So I'm not sure if we need to go through that first, and then can we do the comment after that?
Yes, I apologize. Mr. Sims, Mr. Molino, sorry.
President Brooks and Mr. Toby, that was the presentation.
Yeah.
Now, we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Molino.
All right, stand by. So just, could you teach me, Mr. Sims, a little bit about the CDL requirement as far as how many hours per day are CDL drivers allowed to operate, and is that different from working? Let's start there.
So minimum standards for Arizona school bus drivers does give us a number that we have to follow. It also follows in line with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration and their ruling for all commercial drivers. In a one-day period, drivers are not allowed to work more than 15 hours on the clock. They cannot drive for more than 10 hours consecutively. So you can break it up with the 15 hours. They cannot drive more than 10 hours consecutively in one day.
Thank you. And then I know we do the split shift here with the bus drivers. Does that count, or is there a minimum hour of rest that our drivers have to have?
If they work the 15 hours in one day, they have to be off the clock completely for 8 hours before they can come in the next day. Our split shifts, it's usually 3 hours in the morning per route, 3 hours in the afternoon per route. You usually get about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours for a midday route. So you could get about 8.5 to 9 hours regularly on a day if you fill up your day with just routes. Yes.
And how many bus drivers would you estimate have a full day out of our 99 that we have?
80% of them, because of the number of short drivers that we are, making up the difference.
And then, are you aware, I saw that we outsourced, I think the name was Hop Skip Drive. Are you aware the number of routes that service takes care, that we outsource, and how much that costs?
I do. Our department has 21 students with Hop Skip Drive right now. Some of them are siblings, so there's 3 in 1 vehicle for a ride. And we cover that. It's mostly our McKinney-Vento students that we transport on Hop Skip Drive. I know our special services uses them as well for other students that they service.
And are you aware of how much that costs us in the year?
So far this year, we are upwards to, I believe, 30,000, I think is what we just increased our purchase order to cover where we're at right now. And we'll probably expand that maybe another 20 to 25 for the rest of the year.
And then what have the discussions been like as far as looking in-house at incentivizing current employees to maybe non-instructional employees to carry a CDL and to supplement our driver population?
Mr. Molino and I have had a couple of discussions regarding that with coaches, our athletic coaches, to help cover some of those areas as well. Other districts have done it many times with assistants, classroom paraprofessionals and assistants in the classroom do come out and drive. Some districts also use maintenance staff as well to cover and drive. There's been a lot of options, Mr. Molina. I've discussed some of them to move forward.
Mrs. Schwartz, Mr. Toby, that is something that we've discussed over the last 2 years. We have not successfully been able to implement a program like that. We've even looked at teachers, but then there's the crossing from being a certified teacher to an hourly employee in when they clock in. And then there's if somebody is, let's say, making $15 an hour in one job versus starting pay of a bus driver of 19 when they clock in, clock out. So those kind of technical details, we haven't been successful in getting an employee that is interested in doing that, going through the process of getting their CDL. We have had employees that were bus drivers have moved to other departments that have gone back to help. The transportation department when there's either field trips or filling a need on a given day, but to get a brand new employee that's a classified hourly that is interested in becoming a bus driver, we have not been successful in finding an employee that wants to go that route.
Okay, thank you. So I think it was during the presentation, it was talked about that the transportation department knows what it needs to be successful. What do you need, Mr. Sims, that you don't have at your disposal at the moment?
The obvious answer right now is just drivers. We need more people. The industry has suffered over the last couple of years, not just here in Peoria or here in Arizona, nationwide. The responsibility a school bus driver has, it is more than just driving the bus to and from school. We like to use the term student transporter instead. A bus driver basically drives the bus. Your student transporter is your mom, your dad, the grandma, the grandpa, the shoe tire, the Kleenex hand router. We do so much behind the bus. We're doing student management in a 40-foot tin can driving down the road with so many other vehicles around us, and now construction and more people moving into our area. So the responsibility for the position is huge, and it does take a special someone to do this job. You've got to have a love for the kids, because your first mindset behind it is you want to do this for the kids. You want to be that person that helps them succeed every day. So our biggest challenge right now is just getting people in. Our challenge comes with, it has been mentioned, a compensation for the position. It has steadily increased in other areas over the years. CDL drivers have become more and more needed in areas, and in some places it just kind of stays a little stagnant. Our first resource that we need is people to come in. Our second one is the dedication from people to be there. We have such a great schedule with working during the school year. For parents, you get that time off with your kids when there's no school, and we get the 2 weeks at Christmas, we get that week at spring break, we get the holidays, the 3-day weekends when we have federal holidays. But it takes a dedicated person to want to come in and understand you're going to work morning and afternoon. You can pick up the extra in the middle of the day or on the weekends for field trips. It just takes that dedicated person. That's where we struggle finding those people to come in right now.
So I did see the slide where it also listed the number of vacancies in order to be fully staffed. Do you have a number of bus drivers or student transport specialists that we need to get to act as a pressure release valve in the meantime if we can't get fully staffed?
Yeah, the number that was up there was vacancies are 29, and that's a number that's been on the books for a while. Over the last few years, we've been able to kind of compress our routes looking at ridership, and that had started before I came in to Peoria, and this year our route supervisor and I have really looked at it, what our ridership is. The demographics change in certain areas. You get about a 10-year cycle where it completely grows and it starts to fall off as students graduate out, parents are home, you have the older kids. So we've started to see this in certain areas where it kind of goes up and then down again. So we've been able to compress some routes and drop down to the 97 routes that we have right now. To be fully staffed and have a driver in every position, we only need 3 people. And we would have 1 person in every position. Where we run into I don't want to use the word trouble, it's not trouble. We run into our wall real quick every morning is the call-ins, the last minute call-ins, and the scheduled time off. We do reserve a certain amount of people to be off in a day. We know there's stuff that needs to happen. we get 3 or 4 a day, and then all of a sudden it's 5, 6, 7. If we deny it, we're not sure if they're going to show up even though it's denied, or if it's going to turn into a call-in, and then we get the call-ins every day. That's where we struggle. If we have 3 open routes that are not assigned to anyone right now, I have 2 that are testing next week for their third-party test for their CDL, and then we have 1 in training that should be done within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Those would be the 3 to fill, and we start with a clean slate every day, which is exciting to see, I will be honest. When we walk in, okay, we're starting -3 every morning. Seeing that we're full is great. I want to see some more accountability and showing up and coming in to do the job.
Sounds like we need maybe a cadre of reserve drivers and more than just the 7 substitute ones we have, right?
Yeah, and some of those 7, Mr. Toby, are our office staff for our subs. We currently have, I think, 3 just sub drivers. Our subs kind of make their own schedule. They don't work every day. It's when they're available, they let us know, here's my availability this week, and then we call them in on those days when they're available.
Mrs. Rooks, Mr. Toby, if I may, if you're asking, I'll give a number based off what I have seen and experienced the department go through over the last 3 years. I would say 15 or 20% more drivers. And the reason being, if the accountability, the turnover, so giving us, especially in the summer of 23, so we could stabilize, not have office staff and mechanics do their job and dedicate and not have to worry about that there aren't enough sub-drivers available. Just, so I would say percentage-wise, 15 or 20% more drivers.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for, actually. I think a lot of industries are minimum staffing plus 20%, so I think that's a fair
To have that
statement.
bank sitting there, to have a bank of drivers that are available every day, yeah.
And then, Mr. Molino or Mr. Sims, could you talk us through a little bit about the comparable pay that we see in the surrounding districts so we know where we sit?
Josh Snow, our Director of Human Resources, has been working on a salary study. Mr. Molino's been working with it. I've been looking around. Numbers off the top of my head, well, actually Kevin has a sheet here. Nearest to us, through 2024 data collected, Agua Free Union is at $23 starting. Dysart Unified, which is right next to us, is $21.86. Trying to get those right next to us. Glendale Union is $18.25. Deer Valley is $18.99. Glendale Elementary just up there is to $22.65. Going a little farther out, Litchfield Elementary is at $22.56. Tempe Union is still at $18.58. With experience, those numbers can be a lot higher depending on how far they go up the chart with experience, up on their years. I think Peoria does up to 6 years experience, 7 years experience. And then some districts do sign-on stipends, or they'll do retention bonuses throughout the year. I know one district that I work with another director, they do a $2,000 stipend a year for retention, and they get it $200 a month. So if they're not here for the full year, they don't get the full $2,000. It's every month that they're here, they get a piece of it.
President Rooks, Mr. Toby, one of the things that we've seen from gathering the hourly wage data is even if our $19 an hour, might be almost competitive, which it's not, the percentage of experience and how other districts then increase that starting pay, ours is not competitive at that level.
And I'm not sure, is it true that we are talking about a pay increase for bus drivers during these current contract rollouts? I thought I heard that earlier.
That I don't know any information on that one.
What was the question, sir?
Well, I believe it was discussed earlier that there might be a discussion about pay increases currently going on. I have not heard any. Mrs.
Thank you. Good afternoon, President Rooks, Mr. Toby, members of the governing board. As part of our budget development and work with the budget team, bus driver compensation is one of the priority areas. And in fact, the governing board just recently at a governing board meeting highlighted that as a priority. And so that is being reviewed, and we'll be providing an update to the governing board at an upcoming board meeting in February.
All right. Thank you very much. That's all I have right now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Toby. Mrs. Bowles, you may start your questions.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for everyone being here. I know you took time out, and I understand what that's like. Mr. Toby asked a lot of the questions that I already had. First of all, I want to address the father who the district lost their child. I don't even know what to say to that. But what I won't do is blame anyone else. We need to figure out what happened, how it happened, and be better. And if that means speaking to this father and accountability, then I'm willing to do that. Because blaming is not going to get anybody anywhere. And I'm sure the people involved, I have not spoken to, but I'm sure that they care about children. You know, many of us, even as parents, have made mistakes, but we do need to give account to the father. I mean, that's transparency 101, and not play the blame game, because nobody gets anywhere by that. So I have, like I said, Mr. Toby asked a lot of the financial side of things that I had questions on. I am hearing from constituents that I can't remember the gentleman's name, so I apologize, but one of you got up in public comment and said, and I think you said prior administration you didn't have a voice with. Has that changed? Is there an open door policy? Because what I'm hearing is the doors are locked to the office and they cannot get in the office to even ask the questions that they need. I did ask, and I met with Mr. Molino and Dr. Summers about some of these issues, and I'm not one to play the game of hearsay, but when I'm hearing and seeing, it's outside of this boardroom, and I'm not having that conversation with people. So in other words, they're not seeking me out because I'm a board member. I worked in this district for 9 years, and I know people, apparently. That aside, so it's not hearsay that I'm hearing that part. I would like some explanation. Are the doors locked? Why are they locked? And why are employees feeling like they're not being heard? And in addition to that, I don't remember the slide you used, Mr. Molino. Increased stress and decreasing morale, increased absences, add stress. Of course, I get that. But how do we know what tool, so to speak, did we use to monitor or capture that data, knowing that that is the reason why people are not showing up? Or can we be better with morale? Obviously, pay is one of them. That's a no-brainer. To be fair, we're brand new on the board. Your job is important, so if you don't hear from anyone, you're going to hear that from me. I have relatives that are bus drivers in other states. And that's being a prior school district employee, you're the first face my students saw. And I had many conversations with bus drivers, so I do really appreciate your role. I also know that things have changed where, you know, medical and all these other things, cameras on the buses, all these other things have changed or evolved. We want to support the bus drivers. We want to hear what you have to say, but we also want to see who's following up on that. So I don't know if you can speak to Mr. Sims, if you have an open door policy, if the doors are locked and nobody can get to you, what does that mean?
Thank you, Ms. Bowles. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you on this. When I came in this summer, they came through and we're doing some security measures through our building, talking about cameras outside and our doors in the back where admin is, where we have confidential files for CDL and the personnel side that we have to keep for DPS as well. And the doors had always had something there, but it wasn't fully secured from everything. So what we did was we asked them to put the scanner like we do in the front doors here and to other departments on that door. A lot of it was for confidentiality reasons. If I'm in the back talking with my supervisor, the way our office is set up, mine and one supervisor kind of around a corner. If we're talking in a hallway, we were finding more drivers coming back and wandering kind of around and listening. So we kind of made a security barrier there so we could have open conversations in the back without drivers constantly wandering through. We've had a couple conversations with some that they do come back and they kind of wander and stare in an office and then kind of wander to the next office and keep going with no reason to be in the back. There is an open door policy. I've let them know, we have talked multiple times, you know, let dispatch know that you need to see me. If I'm here, absolutely, please come back and sit and talk with me. I've had multiple conversations with many of our staff that comes back and sits with me. The doors are moving constantly, opening and closing. They are locked, and it is for a lot of just confidentiality reasons of what we talk about on that backside with supervisors or with my secretary as we're having conversations. It's not to lock anyone out. It's not to keep anyone away. A lot of it is just so we know who's around those confidential files and stuff. We do keep them locked. There are moments when we do have them open, we're getting stuff out of it. We kind of step away to go through. We don't want anyone coming getting anyone else's information that they shouldn't have. And it was more of a confidentiality piece for our staff also. If someone is back talking with us in our office, don't need everyone kind of wandering through, oh, he's in there talking with this one this time, so on and so forth. That was the reason for the securement for the back office. Then in evenings and weekends, we're working where we will be locking down that back section and alarming that part of the building because of the confidentiality and the records that are kept back there.
Okay, I can appreciate that. Being someone who worked with IEPs, which are federal documents that you don't leave laying out, without giving you an answer, which I'm not going to do, how could you be more open door policy and show your employees that? Because I'm hearing what I'm hearing and I have to present that. How can we get better at that? Or have you made changes? And I'm not saying unlock the door. I'm not saying that. I know exactly where you are, meaning location-wise, and I am definitely not saying that. But how can we do better? And I'll honestly, to be transparent, I'm hearing morale issues are happening, and it could be just a transition of new people. I get it. But we don't have a gauge. We don't have a measuring tool. We're just kind of throwing out there that, oh, it's because people are calling in. It very likely could be. I just want to make sure that if the morale is down, that we work as a team and figure that out. Pay is not the only thing that's going to bring morale up. And if you've ever worked on a campus, and most in the room understand this, that means everything. That means everything. Morale on a campus, you're going to show up no matter what's going on in your life, even on the lower end of the pay. And I'm not making excuses for that by any means. We definitely are looking into that. But I don't have a way of knowing, is the morale really an issue? Or are we just kind of blaming people calling in? You know, I don't know. I mean, how are you gauging that? How are we measuring that?
We don't have a certain gauge on why they're calling in, if it's morale, if it's, they call in sick, they call in personal days. We don't have a gauge of when we have these big spikes on certain days. Morale, when I came in, was not bottom low. It was around here, kind of wavering. There has been an uptick in morale. We are seeing a lot more laughter throughout the building in the break room. We are seeing a lot of more just conversations had on that social side. It's no longer more of a one versus everyone else. We're seeing more jump in when someone needs help without us asking. They're jumping in now. Hey, I can run over and do this. When you do have a leadership change, morale will kind of do this. You said you've worked on a campus, we've seen it. You get a new principal, you're not sure what to think yet. How is this one going to behave? How is this one going to act? What's their reaction going to be to certain things? You kind of gauge what's going on. I believe that's what I'm still getting with staff also. They're still gauging me as well. I make myself present in the dispatch office a lot. I make myself present in the break room throughout the day and in the hallway as much as I can as they come clocking in, clocking out, or in the middle of the day. I make sure to have conversations with them. I have not been able to get out into the yard as much as I want to when they're pre-tripping and post-tripping, but I make my way over to the shop, make sure I talk with those guys. They see a presence. I don't have time to sit in my office too often and do too much at one time, but I make myself out and about throughout the building. That's where a lot of conversations will start when someone wants to start, they have something they want to talk about. Well, hey, do you got some time? Let's go back and have a conversation with it. We are working with our maintenance department to have the remote buzzer so our dispatch can, when someone says, hey, is Tommy in? I want to talk to him. Yeah, he's back there. Hang on a second. And they buzz them back in to come to us. I don't think we've ever said, no, you can't come back here unless there was something going on in the back that needed to be handled right then and there. And in that case, we've asked supervisors to go out to dispatch office to be the face to have those conversations with what they need right away.
Okay,
So-
well, it sounds like you're already doing some of the things that, I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And if we can support somehow with some of that, again, going back to pay, we hear you clearly. But if we can support you in that, let us know. Yeah, it takes a good 3 years just to get used to being in an environment. So I get that, or building relationships, so to speak. So that's really all I had. Well, no, that isn't all I had. I do have one more question, because I don't know. Are we using any of what we call, what has been standard called short buses? Are we using the smaller buses to pick up, 1 and 2 students? Are we utilizing, do we even have a driver that can do that?
We're using the entire fleet that we have, which is our 40-foot buses, our 35 and our 32-foot buses, which is considered our special needs buses because they are equipped for students with a special need, like the wheelchair lift. We use all of them. Some of our special needs routes run 4 and 5 just because of distances.
Right.
They may attend way up in the north section and they attend Kachina Elementary. And picking up all along the way with each stop could be a 3 to 4, 4 to 5 minute we like to take our time with some of our students that need that special care. So distance-wise, we try to keep all of our routes for special needs under an hour. That is a long time for someone with special needs on a vehicle. It's also long for like a kinder, first, second, third grader in our general education program to be in a vehicle also. We try to keep everything in an hour for time-wise. Julie, our route supervisor, is amazing looking at and seeing this gamut of where can I put this group together, have an efficient time where we can also use efficient use of the vehicle itself. I don't like seeing buses that only run 2 and 3. Is there something we can combine? Because that way, when I start combining, we go through this tier and we combine this tier to combine. We've now freed up 1 full person that we can move somewhere that we didn't have a driver in the first place.
And then just one more question. Do you see an increase of need for special needs buses in our district? Not necessarily buses, drivers, the whole, getting them to school.
Our special needs population is growing. It's not just here in Peoria. It is across the state and across the country. It continues to grow, and that's where we see more of our need right now is the number that come in, because we can't put 37 students on an IEP in 1 vehicle. It's not safe for them. It's not what's best for the student. So we have to kind of split it out. We try to go with my ultimate would be between 10 and 12 on a special needs bus. If we can do it, sometimes, like I said, with distance, we can't, timing, we can't. But 10 to 12 is a good number where you have support with your assistant, the driver can still see what's going on, and you can get about a good hour if we stay within like a 4 or 5 mile range.
Okay, all right, that's all I have. Thank you.
President Rooks, if I may.
Yes,
and
Dr. Summers.
Thank you, ma'am. And Mrs. Bowles, I just wanted to interject just 2 additional comments. And Mr. Sims, thank you for those responses. The first is, and I appreciate that the board is really invested and interested in understanding the culture dynamics. I think when we're talking about that unique to transportation, obviously every department, every building, every school has its unique culture. I just want to say that I think it's also important for us as a district and as a system to really make sure that we are doing our part. I don't believe it's only on Mr. Sims or only on our drivers. I think, and I will just put my hand in the air and say, I can do a better job. I think we all can do a better job. I appreciate that there's an effort and a motivation to not just saying that, but then how do we actually do that? So I don't want to pontificate too much on that. I just want to call out that I think that's a team effort, that's a unified effort, that's a Peoria unified aspect. And so to your question about how do we measure, how do we know, I think those are some systemic practices that we can implement as we go forward. So I just want to tee that up so that as we do prioritize culture in those efforts, that it's really important that we're not just thinking tactical strategies or even a strategic plan, it's really that culture piece. So just want to echo what Mr. Sims also shared, because it's not easy to be put on the spot right out of the gate and say, hey, what are we doing? What are you doing, sir? What are we all doing? And so again, just putting my hand up in the air, because I think that's a shared leadership, responsibility, and approach that's really important for us as a system. The other thing I do want to do, though, and you brought up at the beginning, Mrs. Bowles, and I think it would be an opportunity for us, President Rooks, with your permission. I do think it's okay for us. We did share in the Friday report a detailed summary of what occurred on that Monday, but could we please, if you don't mind, and I know Mr. Molino and Mr. Sims have also made themselves available to talk to parents in that space, would it be okay to just give a brief account of the details of what occurred on that day, just so that we can make sure that that's out in the space?
Yes, Dr. Summers, I would very much appreciate that, because I know all the board got a copy of what timeline, what happened, so if you could walk us through that, I would appreciate it.
Thank you,
And
ma'am.
then we'll come back to the rest of you for comments. Okay.
I'll start it off, and then you correct me when I start to deviate. If I remember the document with the timeline and the steps and procedures, over the last 2 weeks, the transportation was looking at bus runs that could be merged, and there was 3 buses out of Estancia. One had, I don't know how many students, Mr. Sims probably knows that, had a low amount of students that were riding on a daily basis, and there was enough time and capacity in 2 other buses to split those students over the other 2 buses. So taking 3 buses of Estancia down to 2, freeing 1 entire bus run. During that time, when they finalized it, they created a memo that went out to parents, I believe on Thursday and Friday. There was a misstep in communication within the transportation department. And Mr. Sims did not know that the department communicated with parents before they communicated to the school. So we always start with principal and assistant principals first, and then parents. So that step was missed. When Mrs. Bennett found out about it, which was Friday afternoon, they were in communication with transportation Monday morning. Parents were already aware. The memo had gone out, notification to the parents also through the Edgelog Parent Portal app, then went out to the parents. There was a group of students whose name ended up on 2 bus rosters. Is that correct?
Correct.
So when those students they got picked up in the morning, in the afternoon, when they went to get on a bus, they were on 2 bus rosters. So when they were verified, they were allowed on a bus. Then they were on that bus until the end of the route and then brought back to school. During that time, when Mr. Andrade and other parents started contacting the school, they started calling transportation. I believe at that day, that Monday afternoon, Mr. Sims, were you in dispatch?
Yes.
Mr. Sims was in dispatch answering calls. They communicated with the bus. Once they realized that the students were on the other bus, they were brought back to the school, and then they were reunited. Administration took the students, and then they were reunited to the parents. I don't know, then they were put on another bus to get back home where parents picked up.
Parents picked them up from school. Parents picked them up from school after we returned them back. The biggest step that was missed was that communication to the school first, to notify them that there was a change coming that affected their students and their campus. And that has been addressed and corrected in our office with how we do that, and an order that it gets done first and gets verified as it goes through. The school and principal will always be first. We notify them before we send letters home to parents. We send letters home to parents, and then we send a reminder usually the day before a change would happen, and then the morning of a change, we will send a notice to parents through the app also, just as a reminder of the change. We also send copies of the ridership for each vehicle to the school, so they can verify on those days also.
And if I may, President Rooks, just shape a little bit of a follow-up question, but with respect to why it's important for the school administration to know first, can I just venture a guess and you validate if I'm spot on? Because the school is responsible for ensuring that students are getting on the right bus. If they don't know that there's that shift that has been made, that was where the gap occurred. So that's why those students, when they got on the other bus, were not necessarily in a place where they could be redirected to the appropriate location. Is that a fair?
That's fair to say, yes, yes. And the fact that the schools can be our advocate also to help us get the word out with their pushes to parents from their messaging portal as well. So
just want to be clear, we're not trying to do just school communication without parent communication. It's both that are important, but in that case, that missing link is what led to students then getting on the wrong bus.
That was the big piece, was the non-communication to the school first, and we have addressed that and moved forward.
I just have one quick question with the timeline. Because I was reading it, you said that they became aware, the principals, assistant principals became aware Friday. But on the paper, it says on January 27th, which would be, I believe, the Monday, it said 8:15 a.m. The Vistancia assistant principal emailed for the transportation list of changes due to the condensed bus routes. She tried to pull what information she could from Synergy. So I guess I'm just, if they were notified Friday, were they all gone from the school, or did they not see the changes made until Monday morning?
President Rooks, Mrs. Bennett administration found out when one of the drivers at Vistancia handed a Vistancia staff member a copy of the memo that was given to parents.
Okay, and
So-
that was?
So that was Friday afternoon.
Friday afternoon.
The communication from the Transportation Department, official from Mr. Sims' office or the routing department, did not go out to Vistancia until Monday morning. That's when Mr. Sims found out that that first step in communication wasn't done.
Okay, all right. I do have more questions, but I want to make sure that Mrs. Proudfit, Mrs. Ewing can.
I mean, it's up to you. If you want to ask them, because that may take care of it. I don't know.
Okay, just, I'll get back to questions of regular transportation, but just on this subject here, I guess for me, I noticed two things in here. One is you mentioned that our Director of Transportation, Mr. Sims, was not notified of the change, so I question why was that? And then the second one in here, I believe it says at 4:02 p.m., a parent became aware that their child was missing. So it looks like the assistant principal tried to call transportation and was put on hold twice for 10 minutes each time. So I'm just kind of concerned with the part of why were you not notified as Director of Transportation? And then two, the communication piece, if we have a child or children that are missing, being put on hold for twice for 10 minutes each time. I just want to better understand that.
I understand that as well. The communication piece with me, the routing office sends me the email when they make the changes with the school, so I got it Monday also. That's where we started to make, hey, we need to know this earlier, so we're contacting schools. So I was notified, it was just on Monday when the notice was sent to schools as well. So that's what we have addressed also in our communication with our department as well. So we're all on the same page of when this happens. And then the on hold, I answered when the assistant principal did call. She let me know what was going on, who were they looking for. I did place her on hold so I could get on the radio to reach the driver. It was a pretty busy afternoon on the radio with these changes and some other stuff going on. Getting through and on that radio call to speak with the driver took a few times to get through. I kept going back and saying, hey, I'm still trying to get the driver. I haven't forgotten about you. We're still here. And then I got back, let her know we didn't have that student, but this one was on this bus. Okay, now this one's on the other one. So it was going back and forth. They were on hold for a unreasonable amount of time. I was checking back in, letting them know, hey, I'm still here. We're trying to get this driver so we can get the information that we have.
Okay, and then I guess normally when you have your route department, you mentioned, when they make changes to the route, do we have a process of the route changes going ahead of time to be approved by you? Like, just in general, do you give approval before it's sent out to the schools?
It's a conversation that's had between usually the routers and their supervisor, and then I kind of jump in and we start talking, hey, I bring up a lot of them, hey, would this work? This is what I'm seeing. Can we combine? We have some conversations about it before we really pull anything, and then we start looking at data, getting numbers, how many are actually writing, what's assigned, have we seen these students? So before a change happens, there's a conversation about it. And then the decision on the date that it starts is usually between the router and the route supervisor. I don't get much involved in that. Like I said, I'm told when it happens. and we're going to start a new route, so.
Okay. And then, I guess communication piece, this is my last question, Ms. Brown, Ms. Ewing. With this communication piece, I know you said that your route department will send out that memo to the schools, but is there, I'm looking to Ms. Airy, I didn't know, do we work in partnership with our communications department to also send out that memos to the schools?
President Rooks, members of the board, I'll start, and then you can jump in here, Tommy. And so you heard mention that Mr. Molino mentioned the EduLog parent portal. So almost all of the communication related to bus routes goes through this EduLog system separate from Parent Square. I would say it's about the one exception to Parent Square, and that's because EduLog, especially with the registration features, allows those communications to be really targeted. It would be very complex through Parent Square to isolate down to a specific route and the specific students. The EduLog system allows the transportation team to do that, and to do that very, very quickly as information is coming into dispatch. And so I believe that's the system that they use to communicate all of those updates. Of course, if there's some type of an emergency regarding a bus, then communication processes are very, very different and then run through our communications team.
Okay, and then the memo or the communications through that program, do you do anything, does that also then send to the school administration? I guess I should have clarified, sorry.
President Rooks, members of the board, that system is directly messaging parents specific to those routes.
Okay, all right. Mr. Sims, do you have anything to add? Sorry.
We do have it set up for the parent portal for an administrator side, where all of our schools have access to see their vehicles and the messaging that goes as well. One of my office staff, we were talking earlier this morning, we need to make sure we're reaching out to those schools that they know that they have that access also by reminding them of what their login is, because it's a generic one for the school, for just the office staff, so they can see what we're putting out also. I know some of our administration at the campuses have their own that they've set up through the parent portal, not the admin side, but the regular parent portal that parents see also, and they will track certain buses, and sometimes it's their own students, so they see those messages as well. I do work with Ms. Aries' department. I will call sometimes and go, hey, I need to put this out. What is your idea on how we can say this and get our point across in a quick and minute manner? Because the more information you put out, it gets convoluted. You want to give to the point, so they get the basic information right away. And then they can reach out to us if they have more questions, of course. So I've worked with her department on that multiple times, but we are working, and with this campus in particular, I spoke with Ms. Steele again this morning and said, here was your login again, just want to make sure you were able to get into it. She called, she had one little issue, it was taken care of within 5 minutes, and she goes, I see my buses, I'm happy. I said, perfect.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Oh, Mr. Molina, go ahead.
President Rooks, one of the things that we know that we need to improve on is, as we have leadership changes at schools, that we get the information for items like this and the operating procedures of the transportation department to the new leadership when those changes happen.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to you guys because I have more questions, but it's not pertaining to this. So, Mrs. Proudfit.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for coming, and thank you, bus drivers and transportation department, for what you do. A lot of our conversations have taken on this tone of helping students to arrive at school ready to learn, and certainly arriving to school is key to that. I come into this role from a business background, so I look at things as I would one of our businesses. If we're having a retention problem and a recruitment problem, it's because of compensation and culture. That's it. It's a simple problem with a simple solution that's also very difficult. But to what Mr. Blair said, I completely agree with what you're saying. If our salary isn't competitive, we're not going to get the employees. That's it. That's just the truth of the matter. Unless you have a culture that is so far above and beyond and have these, non-monetary compensatory things which pretty much don't exist, you're just not going to get the employees. And so that's something that we need to work on. As we work on that, I want to ensure that we're not just focusing on starting salary. I know it looks like we've had this huge jump in salaries, but let's remember, in the state of Arizona, we've had a huge jump in minimum wage. And so I would say that it's pretty normal. Those are really not those big of jumps, right? Like, we're not that far ahead of the game, and certainly we need to be on the top end with our starting salaries. But I also want to make sure that we're looking at ensuring that we're retaining our veteran employees. And let me explain why. Because veteran employees are the heart of the culture. And when you have those leaders kind of providing that example, you're going to have less turnover. You're going to have more accountability. The thing with new employees, great, we love new employees, but it takes a minute to see if this job is really a fit for them. And to your point, this is not a job that's for anybody. As a mother of four, I wouldn't say that I would want anybody driving my kid to school. I want someone that's going to be a friendly face and want to be there and truly love the kids and be in this job instead of working for Updike Distribution or Night Transportation or any of the many places in Peoria that we have for people with CDLs, that they really want to be in this education sect. And so I think that we really need to look at the starting salary immediately, which I know is complicated if money grew on trees, right? But also we need to be looking at how we are incentivizing those veteran employees and allowing them to step into taking ownership of the culture piece. It was really hard for me to hear, and I want to make sure I understand this correctly. So the purple papers are the emergency, like we need people to fill. So when that happens, there is no compensation for that? Am I understanding that correctly?
Excuse me, sorry, we can't have anybody yelling from, it's okay. Just so you know, we can't have any comments made in the audience, so I apologize, but thank you.
President Rooks, Mrs. Prophet, Mr. Sims, please correct me. Since these are classified hourly employees, they come in, they clock in through Time Clocks Plus, they're on the clock. They get paid the hourly rate based off the timesheet through Time Clocks Plus. It doesn't matter whether they drive one route or 3 that day, they're paid by the hour. Same thing if they do, whether it's field trip might be midday field trips or a different rate, but if they continue work, since they're hourly employees, they don't get extra compensation for taking on another responsibility.
Okay, so in their initial job description though, do we stipulate like, this is how many routes you can expect and we're exceeding that? Like, is this like an expectation versus reality situation, or why is this purple paper? Because I totally understand what you're saying. It's not a salary position, it's an hourly position, and what you're asked to do within that hour is really up to your employer. But have we set an unreal expectation for what could be expected within that?
The purples are the way that our dispatchers notify our drivers coming in that, hey, this is what we need covered. We think you'd be able to do this. Can you do this? So they're filled out every morning when they get the phone calls of who's off, who's called in, and they're left in mailboxes. Drivers come in, they clock in, they see the purples, they confirm, yes, I have this, I can cover this today. Our positions are, for drivers, are 35 hours a week. Normally in school bus driver industry area, it's like a 2.5 to 3 hour is your run in the morning and the afternoon. Some runs take all 3 hours, some take 3.5, 4. Some are only at the 2.5 hour mark or 2 hour mark. They're on the clock for that whole time that they're working. So if they come in and they do 2 extra runs and they're there for another 40 minutes longer than what their normal clock out time is, they're still on the clock being paid for that time. But there's nothing that if they're picking up 2 extra runs, okay, there's this also for you because you're doing that. Does that make sense?
It does. Can they say no? I'm just trying to understand the reality of what
they can, and when that happens is we're now back at the beginning finding who can cover that route so we can make sure students get to school. Okay. Normally when they're given the purples for this coverage, for the most part, we're looking at, will this fit with a route? Can this one pick up this route after they're done with theirs, go right into that one? Timing may only be off by 8 or 9 minutes, and they'll have room on the bus, or do we have to bring these 54 kids in, turn around, go back and run 25 minutes late to pick this next group up?
So it just goes right back to compensation, honestly, is recruiting more drivers so that we're not asking, or we're not setting the precedent that this is our new mode of operation. Okay.
And unfortunately, it's been the norm
Yeah.
for a while.
Well, and I understand too. I mean, I wish we could snap our fingers and have everything be fixed, but we do need to give some time as we've had a lot of turnover in this position. We need to allow the dust to settle a little bit. And a lot of the problems that I'm hearing are just a lot of communication problems of just expectation versus reality and just over communicate, and just you as a leader being able to set, you know, using Dr. Summers' words, being able to set that cadence so the drivers know what to expect. They know how to reach you. They know, just kind of being very clear about all of those situations. This is in no way a directive. My suggestion would be that with the route changes, the Vistancia situation, you know, I think all of us up here have kids, and the thought of not knowing where your kid, I mean, that everyone in this room could relate to just the terror of that situation. It sounds like you know exactly where the breakdown happened, which is the great news, because now we know what we need to fix so that it will never happen again. So thank you for being proactive in that. I would just recommend that as, you know, as we go through this transition, maybe just have those things run through you just so you have a handle on all of that, just in case there's another, you know, like I said, over communicate. I did have one other question, and then, because I'm sure you have good ones, but having a transportation center in the north, I know that where our transportation center is located is not ideal for all of our routes, specifically when we talk about Vistancia and some of the road situations there and just the sheer distance. And has there been any communication with the city? I know I kind of mentioned it offhand to some city leaders, to, like, hey, we have businesses coming in and we need a transportation center up north. Like, where are we at with that? What would that change?
President Rooks, Mrs. Profit, we did have our last meeting with the city in the fall. We actually have our next meeting scheduled, I believe, is it next week or the fall? It's within the next couple of weeks. When we met, we had a very conceptual type of conversation, nothing with any actual plan or site in mind. There's a lot of moving parts to that. There's also cost, there's a number of variables. So it's certainly top of mind for us among other needs that we have. And yes, we're willing to certainly partner in whatever way. I know the city is also willing to partner given what's available.
Yeah.
But again, coming back to cost and opportunity and all those different pieces, we acknowledge that would be an ideal state. So I don't think it's anything that we can necessarily plan on within the next the immediate future, I'll say. I won't put a time limit per se there, but I think it's certainly on our radar and it's on theirs as well, and we'll continue to keep that conversation moving forward.
That'd be great, and this is the time to ask the city to step in, because we have some big development happening, and we could surely benefit from a relationship with some of those people. I do have more, but I think most of the questions have been answered. I did have one more, actually, sorry. In regards to the vans, I call them the vans. They're the smaller buses, those white buses that are at campuses. How many campuses for sporting events? I know at my kids' schools, the coaches go and get that licensure so that they can be driving them to and from games. Is that the norm, or is that the exception to the rule?
That's the norm. There's no special licensure for those because it is less, they're 14 passenger and below. Once you get 15 and more, you need a passenger endorsement.
Okay.
So 14 passenger and below is nothing special, or an extra license, let's put it that way. Nothing, and no extra license for those. So a lot of coaches, teachers, security staff at the high schools, they drive those to and from sporting events. They shuttle students around, small trips here and there.
I wasn't sure if we were having to utilize for some of those things, if that would be, like you were saying, some of those non-classified employees, if that would be an opportunity to offer them a way to get that certification. I know any employee, if they're offered a free way to get another certification, might be something to look into. I think that's it, though, for now.
Thank you, Mrs. Profit. Mrs. Ewing.
Thank you, and thank you, board for asking so many very detailed questions and stuff. So, but first of all, I want to say thank you to all of the bus driver staff to be here. It's great to see you. I appreciate everything you do. A big apology to the father for that situation. Just like all of the other board members, my heart breaks for the experience that you went through, and I apologize for that. So I'm just going to recap a couple of the things that I've heard my fellow board members say, that Mr. Toby went through and talked a lot about finance and compensation, and I think we've all talked about compensation all the way across. When we look at compensation for our staff, I am curious we always look at it with all the compensation benefits, not just what they're paid, but certainly like Ms. Proudfit said about how can we incentivize the veterans, and when do they get the next pay raises? Is there opportunity for sign-ons or that type of thing? So how do we have that set up? And then is there additional compensation? Usually also includes benefits and so forth. So I'd be kind of curious about that whole package, that when we're really looking at it, can we make sure that we're using all the tools that we have to show value to our employees? So I can ask that question. It looks like you might want to jump in there.
If I could add, we are looking at compensation increases in the future, but I'd like to, if we could go to page 11, please, slide 11, just to revisit that in recent years we have had increases, including the use of recruiting and retention stipends. And in fact, back in 2021, as part of our ESSER funding, we were able to offer, I believe it was $1,750, if memory serves me correctly, an additional recruiting and retention stipend. So with those grant dollars, we did offer those incentives. We also, with our regular retention stipend cadence each year, our bus drivers are part of that. So for example, for fiscal year 25, we had a retention stipend that was phased based on longevity, $500, $750, $1,000, and all of our bus drivers have received the same classified percent increases in recent years as well. And if someone has been with the district for a number of years, several times in recent years, we've had an add-on, an additional percent increase based on longevity. And so our more seasoned veteran bus drivers were eligible for that. Very important to consider that moving into the future, but I did want to highlight some of the work we have done in most recent years.
Thank you, because that was going to be one of my questions, is were they part of all of those things? So,
and if I may also add, when we had our first movement back in 2021 with the increase from $13.99 to $17, we actually did look at sister districts, trying to pace off of where our competition was, because there's such a finite group of bus drivers available. And it's interesting, every time a district moves and has an increase, other districts follow and they jump. And so we've seen that in recent years, and now we're no longer up at the higher end, but more toward the bottom. So it's very important to make sure we're competitive to attract the best bus drivers to be here in Peoria.
Great, thank you. Okay, so that was my question with the compensation. And then I know Ms. Bowles touched on the team building. I would lean into, this was just my throw out, is I would lean into all of the great communication team building exercises that Dr. Summers has been doing at all of our sites with our employees and so forth, and that I have been hearing great feedback from our schools about how they feel like they really have an opportunity to voice, to have some great collaboration and communication. So as far as those things, I see great opportunity for that, and would love to see really Dr. Summers taking an opportunity to come up with something pretty fantastic with your team. I understand what you were talking about with regards to the need to keep that area private because there's confidential information and so forth. But I do think that there's opportunities to really rethink about how do we connect with our teams and so forth, because I don't think anything that you're doing is any different than what a typical management position would end up doing, but it has to be really intentional to figure out what works. And on some of this stuff, I'd be curious on, you have a great staff behind you on what are some of their survey feedback suggestions. Anytime we can include our staff in the problem solving and really building the environment that they like, I think those are great opportunities. And then as far as kind of just technical things, I know that things would be different if the bond had passed, but I know that with it not passing, we are talking about repurposing, boundary changes and all of that. So I'm just wondering if if you have any anticipation, if that's going to create a greater burden or if that's going to alleviate or just make it different.
President Rooks, Mrs. Ewing, that is one of the items that we discussed during the study session last month for facilities master planning. One of the key things as we look at that long-term plan for boundary changes is the capacity of the transportation department to support those needs and changes. So that is one of the factors that we definitely have to include as we look at what options, how boundaries are going to be shifted, especially also in regards to policy EEAA.
And then something that, so I was just curious, I don't know if you.
Mrs. Ewing, I'm just going to interrupt you 1 second. Audience members, it echoes in here, so it's hard to hear when we hear you kind of talking. So I'm so sorry. I'm going to ask if you could please refrain. Sorry. Thank you, Mrs. Ewing. You can continue.
Okay. So I believe that one of the speakers brought this up about Mr. Barron brought it up on retirement. Do we have, like, when our teachers retire, they can come back through like a substitute system? And so is that an option with bus drivers?
President Rooks, Mrs. Ewing, yes, that is through the ESI system. If an employee retires and decides not to go through ESI, they are capped at 19 to 20 hours. Mrs. Vesley?
Thank you. We do have that opportunity for our bus drivers to come back under ESI. I actually met with, I think I've had 2 in the past 3 weeks that are retiring and still want to continue. So they go out at 90% of their last salary, which is governing board approved. We move them to ESI, especially for those that want to be in a full-time capacity, because again, you have to be out of public education, and ASRS guidelines require us not to work in a school district for 365 days. So we do work with those individuals. If there is an individual that doesn't want to go to ESI and doesn't want to be that full-time, we do work at about 19 hours a week, because if they go over that 20-hour mark consistently, it's going to impact their pension, and we don't want to get into areas where it's being impacted. So we always recommend that it's best practice to go to ESI, and we have many that love their job and come back and want to go through ESI.
So since it's an hourly position, what is the hourly pay through ESI?
Governing board has approved 90% of your last salary, less the alternate contribution rate. And so we split that alternate contribution rate one time. The district pays half, the employee pays half. This year, that rate for the employee is 5.1%. Next year, it's going to go down slightly. We take it out one time when an employee goes to ESI, and we also then, when they come back, we have to take it out, but the district pays monthly on that. So it's about 85%. When we're all said and done, of their last known Peoria salary.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like it's based on a percent as opposed to like a set number. So for instance, if we did approve some sort of raise with a compensation, we wouldn't have to necessarily make a change to the ESI substitute system to bring them up, like we do with teachers, because it's a it's a set dollar amount.
President Rooks, Mrs. Ewing, and members of the board, the governing board has approved that anyone going to ESI would go at 90% of their last salary. So we look at their last salary or their hourly rate. So for a classified employee, classified hourly, we look at their last known Peoria hourly rate. They go at 90% less half of the ACR, so it's about 85%.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining that a second time to me. So is there, so as far as pipeline of employees or so forth, is there, how successful are we at recruiting and bringing in those retired folks? Is there a location, you know, like with teacher groups, there's often organizations that are retirees and stuff. So just curious if that's another avenue to explore for bus driver pipeline.
President Rooks, Mrs. Ewing, our industry is a lot of those that this is their second. They've already retired one time over. Or it's the moms that have, you know, kind of stayed home with their kids as they were going to school, and then, oh, hey, they're older now, I kind of want something to do. So a lot of ours are already in that retirement era, that field. They've retired from their first profession. They're already receiving either Social Security or they've got a pension coming in. They're doing this as just a little extra spending money, or because they absolutely love the job. And we have a lot of those that they do it because they don't need to work. They love the job. Recruitment-wise, we have reached out to a lot of retirement communities. That is a fun place to recruit because you get the ones that don't want to stay home for the honey-do lists. And then you got the ones that, well, this is my spending money now, you know, so, and then they play their golf in the middle of the day, you know, and they have something to come back to. So with recruiting in that field, it's been successful. We've also done recruiting on college campuses before, where sometimes our schedule works with their class schedule. They can come in, drive a bus, and then run to class, come back. Or I've even worked with previous universities and colleges in other areas where they park the bus at the campus so they can make sure they get to class. And a lot of first like, hey, if you're gonna run 5 minutes late, not a big deal. So the recruitment side is out there. There's a lot to go towards. But that retiree side, where a lot of our employees are already retired, or they're looking for something fun to do, and they fall in love with this once they start doing it.
Just something I want to add is I was recently on a call with the Glendale Chamber, their workforce education committee. Anyway, they are trying to put together a consortium to help hire veterans. And so that was, I think I included you on that. So anyway, but that they're really looking, when they assess the veterans on what they needed most, they said, we need jobs. And so I've just, that may be something to look into, add to the pipeline if those individuals would be interested, so.
Absolutely. We have a few veterans that work for us. We just hired one this year, younger gentleman that has worked out so well, and he absolutely loves the job, and he's moving full-time over into our shop now. So our fleet supervisor is also a veteran. A lot of our, I think some back here behind me are veterans as well. I welcome them to come join us at any time, absolutely.
And then one other thing, and then I'm done, is just as far as the breakdown in the whole with this last scenario, it sounds like you guys are doing, it sounds like you're already looking at what is your communication flow chart, where can we be better, and you're looking at it from a full spectrum. As Dr. Summers said, it's really a full team approach with that, and how can we really do better. So I appreciate that you guys are already looking at that. How can we make our systems better, and having better oversight and better quality assurance, so to speak. So once you guys have something kind of put together, it'd be great to have that maybe thrown in like a Friday report or something like that, just once you have a better, an opportunity to build something. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ewing. Ms. Bowles, I know you had one comment and question, but if I could just get through mine and then I'll come to you because I'm going to get lost. So yes, I would like to echo off of what you talked about with the changes in routes. I do think Mr. Sims that it should go through you if there are route changes, but also it should go through the principal. That you've got that communication piece back from the principal, that they've received the memo and that they are, moving forward with the plan, and that before it's just, because then it's just the chaos. And I just want to make sure that we don't lose another student again. So I would really appreciate if that, moving forward. And then the GPS slide, GPS link to parent portal app. I just had a question. What vendor do we use for that? Is it the one that you mentioned, Miss Ari, or is that a different one?
Edulog,
Edulog.
educational
Okay.
logistics, known as Edulog for short,
Okay.
yes.
And we have a contract, I'm assuming, with that vendor. Do you know when that contract is up for renew, or is it just freshly? I think you said last year, but I don't remember.
It's renewed year to year.
Okay.
President Rooks.
Okay, because I know that just reading through just a lot of parents' Facebook, seeing things that our comments are being made, they're really struggling with that app. So I don't know if you know that, Mr. Molino.
President Rooks and Mr. Sims, I'll ask you for clarification. Two things, and as a matter of fact, I'll let Mr. Sims explain one thing that I did not know about the app. Can you explain how it is not meant to cover double runs, or what the process is? And then also in regards to the position that just became vacant in the parent portal coordinator.
So the parent portal app, it was a great tool. It is an absolute great tool to get information out immediately. It was built on a platform for quick and easy changes. So let's say bus 12 is out of service for preventative maintenance, or the belt broke, whatever. We're going to move that route into bus 13 for the day. We can switch that so parents can see all the routes from 12. They're now on 13, so they can follow them on the map. The second thing it was built for was quick messages. Bus 12 will be running about 10 minutes late today. Bus 15 will be running about 12 minutes. Those kind of information. It wasn't built for the mass coverages that we're having to do right now, unfortunately. If the driver for 12 is absent that day, and I have to have Route 13 cover 13 and 12, I can put the message out that 12 will be a double run. Bus 13 will pick up his group first, come back and get Route 12. That information can go out, but when you're looking at following the little bus in your app on the map, I don't know if you guys have seen it, it's a little yellow school bus that kind of bounces around. I can't put all the routes on that one bus for the parents to see that. So if I put Route 12 on 13, then all of Route 13's parents no longer get to see that bus because Route 12 is seeing that bus. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that
Okay.
makes sense.
So, and then when we're doing what we call out there on with, meaning this bus is going to pick up this route at the same time they're doing the route, I can only leave it to view for one run to see that vehicle, because if I move Route 11 onto 12 while 12 is picking them all up, parents from Route 12 will no longer see their bus, they're just seeing bus 11, but Route 11 is only going to, so it wasn't built for that complex type of system. When we're doing double runs, the only way really around it is we're watching on our GPS screens, and when we have 97 vehicles running around, it can get a little convoluted. But seeing if this bus comes into the school at this time, okay, they're there, let me go and see if I can get this switched real quick, so then the next group of parents can see that one. But we're failing on that because of the phone calls we're answering, making sure this is happening, oh, this one broke down, we're gonna go get this one fixed. So we just kind of put the messaging out there, and we try to say, hey, it's gonna run 15 to 20 minutes late approximately. If we know it's gonna be longer than that, then I can go in and put another message in real quick. We had one call this morning, hey, I'm doing my double route, I'm actually gonna run about 8 minutes late this morning. Perfect, thank you for letting me know. I put a message in real quick, it was gonna run 8 minutes late opposed to what was predicted for the 25. The person that kind of covered that whole thing, our parent portal coordinator, just resigned and moved on to another field. There are 6 of us in the office that can put the messages in and do all that, so we're kind of rotating through. We've been working on getting the information out timely, but we don't want parents whose kids pick up at 8:15, 8:20 to get a message at 4:45, 5 o'clock in the morning. Because when that starts going off, when your phone goes off that early, you're not expecting it, it kind of makes you jump a little bit. So we've been kind of looking at when can we send the messaging out. We've been starting about 5:25 to 5:30. We start sending first tier. We've been sending second tier out about 6:25 to 6:45. Third tier's been going out about 7:15 to give enough time so they can see what's happening. So with that person leaving, it's moved to a bunch of us kind of getting together to put it in, which is great also with that cross-training. So if someone's not there, there is someone available to put that message in. Unfortunately, this afternoon, that didn't work when everyone was driving, and then I got called to a last-minute emergency. And so I got in and was doing it as quick as I could in the afternoon to give parents the information. So with that one leaving, which we have applicants for, we're going to start aggressively going into that, pulling in for interviews this week. I will be pulling those apps to look, see what we have in there so we can work on filling that position. But there are 6 of us that do that. The app is a great thing to get information out quickly, as long as we can use it for what it was designed for. We're not trying to overuse it for stuff that it can't handle.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the explanation on it. I know it said up there are 72 buses that were in the future possibly needing to be repaired. I know this was brought up before, I think by myself, but I had heard something about Liberty Buick wanting to help with those repairs. I don't know, Ms. Myers, if that was ever re-looked at.
Thank you. President Rooks, members of the governing board, you may recall there was a Friday report after the question was posed regarding Liberty Buick. Peoria Unified has a number of repair companies, dealerships under contract that we do business with. And one of the reasons why we did not move forward with the Liberty purchase order is because of our work that we do with them with PSBN and donations and things like that, and as well as running some of the pre-game video and activities on Friday nights. And so they weren't covered by a cooperative contract. Our annual expenditure requires, from a procurement perspective, that we use a covered vendor for that work. I don't recall that specifically that work was for buses per se. In all instances, there was a need, timeliness for repairs in general, but we did provide a comprehensive response to the governing board in that Friday report. And I can certainly forward that to you again this Friday for our new members to make sure you have that information.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Myers.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it. Let's see, the Hop Skip Drive. We did attend a presentation of the Arizona School Board Coalition. There was a presentation on that. So I do have a question around that one is what type of, in our contract, do we have on the background checks of the drivers for Hop Skip Drive? Or if you don't know.
President Rooks, I was involved years ago when Hop Skip Drive first came in, and with a group from it was a statewide insurance company that was doing a lot of questions with rideshare, and they came up with a guideline of what we should be looking for when we're looking for outside sources for that, and they put a whole thing together. Hop Skip Drive does do an extensive background on their drivers. They also require level 1 fingerprint clearance cards for all of their drivers as well. They pull their records. I can get you in touch. I can send information on who our contact is through Hop Skip Drive to answer more of those, but I know they do a pretty thorough background check. And then if something pops up, we've been notified this driver's no longer available, and then they won't be a part of Hop Skip Drive anymore. So
Okay.
I know they do a pretty thorough one. When they were looking at moving into Arizona, a lot of questions were asked of what would we be looking for to make requirements for it. And some of the answers were, we think you need the same background checks that our education professionals have, and
Okay.
those fingerprint clearance cards and background checks.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that question. The next one, it was, I think, the ARS slide. Mr. Molino, I think it was, I wrote down ARS 15-341-112. I think it mentioned the last sentence, or it said, if deemed for the best interest of the district. So I didn't know what determines the best interest of the district. And I don't know if that's needs to be legal or?
You know,
I can save that for later if need be, but I just, yeah.
President Rooks, I'll look at Ms. Siegel and see if she can provide any advice on
So
this.
sorry.
The way I have interpreted this one and the reason I listed it is that we are only required by law, the way I understand it, to provide transportation for special education students with IEPs and McKinney-Vento.
Okay,
We are not required to provide transportation services to regular education students.
okay,
And that's where policy EEAA comes in.
Yeah.
And the governing board giving us the permission or directive to provide transportation services to regular education.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Molino. I think that's, yep, good job. Thank you. Yeah, so I do have, I was reaching out to Peoria City Council member John Edwards, just to try to better understand and try to find a solution. He did mention Valley Metro is looking to possibly come and present, the director, the CEO, to see if there's any options there. So I guess my question would be, is that a possibility to work in partnership with our city of Peoria to get possible extra drivers to cover the route until we find like a long-term solution, working through all these problems, compensation, that sort of thing?
President Rooks, I understand from Valley Metro coming with their CDL drivers, if they had the proper credentials, we could. With school bus drivers, we fall under a new category, not only with that Class B CDL with the passenger endorsement and the school bus endorsement, we also have to be certified through Department of Public Safety Student Transportation. So there's more involved. Those drivers have had their CDLs for 10, 12, 15 years. They would also come to us to have 14 hours of classroom per DPS standards, 20 hours behind the wheel, even though they've driven for many, many years, they still have to have those 20 hours behind the wheel, a physical agility test, the new drug screens under FMCSA, the first aid CPR. So there's an extra step where it's not so much that I can call someone and go, hey, you have a CDL, can I borrow 4 of your drivers? If they're not certified through Student Transportation Unit under DPS, they cannot drive a bus for home to school, school to home. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yes, that makes
There is
sense.
there's an extra certification step in there.
Yeah.
That we have to follow as well.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. So I think Mrs. Ewing maybe touched on this. I guess, how have we gathered any feedback on the work environment for bus drivers and trainers? And is there feedback or has there been any, I guess, concerns or complaints brought forward?
Earlier in the year, I did a survey out to the staff through Google for them to answer questions, put their piece in. I do have those. The goal has been to meet with them where we talk about, with this question, question A, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being, this is the best, what does it look like to score a 5? Here's where we scored. What does it look like to score a 5 or get as close to a 5 as possible? And then creating those action steps as a team to move forward to create the goals for our department. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance and the time to sit with them. Our schedules, we start first thing in the morning and go through the day. We do have the morning and afternoon routes, but we have shuttles, middays. We have buses moving constantly. The only time we really get to meet is those Wednesdays on early release where we still miss some. So that is still on the agenda to meet with in spring. I do have those results to share with Mr. Molina. I shared the survey with him earlier this year. He and I haven't even had a chance to sit and talk about it. It's basically what makes the department run. What does a 5 stellar department look like? I do still have those results to use for my goals that I did turn in with Mr. Molino this year for the department on the just director side, but we haven't met with the staff to go over those. There's a lot of great information in there, absolutely. A lot of positive, a lot of stuff that they want seen changed as well, which is what comes with new leadership and creating that culture that we mentioned before. Culture is huge. And it's what makes the team feel like one to get that job done. So there is a survey that has been done. I can sit with Mr. Molina, we can go over that some more. But it was in order to create the goals for the department moving forward with new leadership, to bring a new identity to what Peoria Transportation is and what it can be.
Thank you, I appreciate that answer. How many managers do you have in your transportation department that the bus drivers can reach out to for questions or concerns?
Currently, we have 2 driver supervisors, one for our gen ed staff, one for our special needs staff. And then we have a route supervisor, and that's the one that kind of touches base when they want changes done with their routes. They want to readdress some things. Those are the 3 main pieces in the administration in our office. We, of course, have a mechanic supervisor, fleet supervisor. He kind of covers just the shop. He doesn't get involved with a lot that goes on in our office with routing and the driver's side.
Okay, thank you. So the audit, I did read through the audit that you guys provided, so I had questions about that real quick. When did the audit finish, I guess, and was given to the district?
President Brooks, are you referring to the Transpar assessments?
Yes, yeah. Roughly, I don't know if it's in there.
Trying to remember what year that was.
No,
Fall
it
of
was the one in the
22.
Friday report that we got.
Fall of '22 was when
Okay.
we first contracted them. I believe the PO went out around October.
Okay.
And it was somewhere between January and March of 2023 when we received the final.
Okay. Yeah, so I read through it, and then, so incidents of Desert Harbor is one I have here highlighted. So it was showing on the graph for time and capacity utilization, it's showing that there is, I believe, 7 bus routes here, 7 buses, actually, and that there's over 50 seats that are empty on each one for the AM. So I just didn't know, I kept seeing that kind of pattern through the buses. So is that what you guys are talking about in trying to look at the empty seats and utilization?
President Rooks, that is a lot of it. We also have to look at the data in that as well. Our large buses, the flat nose buses, they're considered 84 passengers. That's 3 to a seat all the way through the bus. With our high school kiddos, it's pretty uncomfortable. We only route for 56. That's 2 to a seat. So when we look at our utilization with the 84 passenger bus and there's 50 extra seats, there could be 30 on that. We would look at putting between 25 and 30 more on there to make it between the 55 to 60. So just want to put that out there so you can see that as well. The 84 passenger can be very uncomfortable for our students, especially our high school students, even some of our middle school students that are growing quickly. So those are something to think of also. But our route supervisor and I are looking at our utilization in the vehicle as well. Do we have a gen ed route that's only running 15 and the one next to it's running 35? Well, I can put the 15, 35 and make 50 on one bus. That gets me almost 2 to a seat all the way through where I'm using more of that vehicle. It's more efficient. I can pull something off the road using less fuel, saving money in the long run until I need to put that somewhere else instead of just adding another bus in.
Okay, all right. Appreciate that answer to that question. And then I guess, so this is more of like, when I hear the concerns around the culture of the bus department, for me personally, I don't think it sends the right message with, you mentioned earlier that, I think it was in response to Ms. Bowles' question of doors being locked and it's because of confidential records, which I completely understand. But I don't think it sends the right message to state that the reason of doing that was because bus drivers are wandering through the hall and trying to listen on conversations and that they have no reason to be there. I just didn't like that statement. I don't think that that is the right message to them because you don't really, do we know why they're walking through the hall? Maybe they're looking for support. Maybe they're, just frustrated and want someone to talk to. I don't know, but I didn't think that that sent the right message. It didn't sit well with me. I wrote it down because I know that was at the very beginning. And you talked about the morale of, it's been changing, that there's happy laughter and bus drivers are laughing and happy and engaged, but that's not what I've heard personally from bus drivers, also bus drivers that have left the district. That's just not what I've heard. And so I just want to make sure that we're really getting the feedback. I understand you did a survey, but I feel like doing a survey of like a 1 to 5 is not really measuring anything. Like, we need to hear the conversations from the bus drivers. We need to hear their actual voice versus, hey, here's a graph. This is what, we're measuring it on. I just feel like it's very constricting that way. So I had to mention that. And I've also heard concerns, so I didn't know if this was a part of the audit or not, but I've heard concerns of bus drivers having to work over the 16 hours and time cards being changed and because I guess, can't go overtime. And so that, to me, that's a big concern. So I don't know if the audit covered that. If it didn't, what is the next step into looking into that matter? Because for me, if there is a requirement that they cannot work over that time frame, then we need to make sure that we're following that, but then also their health. Because if they're not ready for the next shift, prepared to have all of these precious children of these parents that are entrusting us, that's where I'm really concerned as well. So I don't know if that audit covered time cards. That is just something that has been brought to my attention.
President Rooks, no, the assessment from Transpar did not cover time cards, and this is the first time I'm hearing about this. So if we could get some more information, we can work with the Human Resources Department, Mr. Sims' department, and payroll to look at time cards and verify that statement.
Okay. I think maybe I'm just guessing here, because I know you always talk about eye of the beholder. I've heard you say that a few times. But my thought process around maybe why you haven't is we talk about culture and morale. That maybe there is hesitation to share that because they don't want to be blamed for it, or they don't want to be, pinned on. And I just think that maybe there's that hesitation and that wall has been built because of everything that has been going on. And so I'm just, we want to hear from that situation. And so maybe that is something that Summers can sit down and maybe have a conversation like what Mrs. Ewing talked about when you're touring with the schools, touring with the bus department, but really being able to share like, hey, we want to hear, and we're not going to say anything that is going to make you feel like you're now the target. Because I think that's just that wall, and I think that the trust has been broken for the bus drivers, and so we have to rebuild that trust.
And if I may, President Rooks,
Yes.
members of the governing board, if someone has come forward to you making that assertion, we have an obligation to investigate it. So I would ask that you please work with Mr. Molino and Dr. Summers on that. We have an obligation now that that's been shared to follow up on our end. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. I appreciate that. Dr. Summers, I'll follow up with you on that, and I can definitely get you in contact with.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, President Rooks. I think along the lines of what's being discussed right now relative to culture, it's probably more of a how can we share the plan so that it really creates a comprehensive what are our set of next steps, because while I appreciate the board is expecting excellence, I assure you we are as well. So we just have to create more of that so that we can spell that out, so you're not sitting there having to necessarily go piece by piece by piece, because I think that puts us in a position where it will allow us time to be able to develop what that next set of steps can be to achieve that. And I think there's a whole lot relative to how do we know, right? Because surveys are one instrument, right? And then we also understand there's other mechanisms, other ways to improve upon communication and so forth. But I will echo Ms. Meyer's sentiment. We can only respond when we have the information that we need in order to follow up. So we
Okay.
appreciate that partnership with you all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why having this meeting and having the discussion and just going through all of the pieces of it. And so that's kind of where the thought process was on that. And I know that Mrs. Bowles had questions, and I don't know, I want to get back to Mr. Toby, so if he has any, but Mrs. Bowles, go ahead.
Ms. Rooks, President Rooks touched on a lot of the things that I wanted to ask as well, but piggybacking off what Dr. Summers just said, let's start with the corrective actions that we have already in front of us as a board, first off, taking our responsibility for the incident on the 27th. So I would propose that the board know when and how you've accomplished the 5, I think there's 5, corrective actions just in that one incident. So my question is around those corrective actions. So I'm clearly saying, please bring back to the board when that's been accomplished and how it was accomplished. Or maybe it wasn't accomplished, and maybe we need to look at it again. So we can work together as a team, just as what Dr. Summers said, we can't help anything that we don't know either. And I refuse to go by hearsay. We have to, if you can't count it, you can't measure it. It's that simple. We can't go by how we feel. Number 5 says, so this was leading into my question. Number 5 is introduce student ID badges as required for bus ridership to gather bus route, yield data, and enable tracking and auditing of the student ridership. I understand what that is. We've talked a little bit, I think, in the boardroom. I've heard it a few times, I'll just say that. But in the presentation, it shows, unless I missed something, the second phase, that this corrective action from 27th is going to happen next year. Is that what I heard you say?
President Rooks, Mrs. Bowles, yes, that would be an intent. Right now, Mr. Sims is working with 2 or 3 possible schools to test the process and procedures towards the end of the spring, before May, so April, May timeframe, so that then we can learn from that and fully implement and communicate it for August.
So when you have under here corrective actions, I guess I'm thinking they're quicker. I understand that district-wide, that's going to take some time to roll out. Can we start with maybe the bus that in question or the driver in question? Can we start with where the problem lies instead of where it doesn't and then roll it out in a year? Does that make sense?
Ms. Bowles, if you're referring to the Vistancia bus,
Yeah.
that's one of the things that Mr. Sims and I spoke with the principal of Vistancia yesterday to start that process. And there's a few things in regards to how the badges will be rolled out to the students, tracked, logged, communicated. So that's what we're going to be working with.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, because I was seeing it as, wow, another year from now, that's not going to, they could leave by then, and then we're right back to square one. So thank you for that. And then again, just to be clear, if the corrective actions, what we've done, can be reported back to maybe even today or in the next week or so, Friday report, I don't care how it happens, give us dates of when this is going to take place, so then we can revisit and say, okay, we've done these things. I know what it's like to sit in the crowd, and even as an employee, and feel like you're not really being heard because it's never readdressed. I don't think that's the intention of the district. I just think we need to get better at that. So I would appreciate if you'd bring it back to the board, first the dates of when this is going to be accomplished, and then maybe, and then we can help if it's not being accomplished. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Toby, do you have any more questions or comments?
Just a couple. Thank you, Mrs. Bowles, for that last one. That was actually one of mine, because I do think that one of the ways that we are going to lead with excellence is having accountability and follow-up. So thank you for that one. And then also, Mr. Sims, I think on was it the 27th that you were working the dispatch? Is there somebody else that's supposed to work that typically?
President Rooks, Mr. Toby, there were 3 of us working the dispatch office that afternoon, doing phones and radio for the afternoon. It's typically 2 to 3 people in that office at all times. If our normal dispatchers at work that weren't driving, they would be in there. We'll get our third dispatcher, who's an evening dispatcher, she's not driving, she would be in there. And then the parent portal coordinator that we're looking for usually works that shift also, to usually have 4 in that office. So there's always someone for phones, always someone for radio. At the same time, our secretary has a radio on her desk, so if she hears something and they're busy not answering, she can answer. And I usually have mine on right next to my desk also during route time, so I can hear as well. Right now with the shortage, I'm up there every morning and afternoon.
So if we had additional drivers or additional hires, then we could keep those people who are in the communication center communicating.
Correct.
And you directing, right?
Correct.
Okay. I think that's important that, as leaders, we stay out of the stimulation zone so we can have eyes on, hands on where we need. So I would like to see that, if we need to work with HR to either create a temporary solution. Would it help? I mean, obviously, we're talking about what is the solution for the short term and the long term. But in your opinion, Mr. Sims, if we were to outsource some of the vacant routes or some of the additional roles or drivers, would that assist you in maintaining operational control?
To answer that completely truthfully, if we could get just extra drivers, because we're on that process now, we're right on that cusp of having full runs or everyone assigned. It's the extra drivers for those call-ins. If I have everyone assigned, that's a great day. If I have perfect attendance in transportation, there will be some sort of celebration, because it's just not something that usually happens. So there will be donuts, there will be all kinds of things brought in to celebrate that.
Everything's being documented on YouTube right now.
And that's
so you're
fine.
gonna be held to account.
They can hold me to that one, absolutely, because that will be a celebration day. It's those last minute, and we know there's emergencies in families. We know something comes up and we get those calls. When we get the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 at one time, if we had just spare drivers, sub-drivers, that were sitting there ready to go and jump in when we did it, that would cover a lot of it, where our dispatchers would be in the office where there's constant communication. Our parent portal designee would be there, where the other 3 were helping back him up when stuff starts coming in to put out, where I could come in and just kind of, hey, what's going on? Do you need anything? Are we doing all right? Okay, let me know if you need something. And then focus on taking those steps to move our department and take it to that next level that it needs to be at.
And I do want to get a little bit specific here. So, and this is me being the new person in the room here. Do we hold, or do we expect our bus drivers to only let students off at the bus stop that they're allowed to leave on?
They should only be exiting the bus stop where they are assigned to. We do let them off at other stops if a parent is there to meet them, if we have a note that they're going home with someone else. But they should only be let off at the stop that they are assigned to, yes.
And so this instance is perhaps the newness of the route and the unfamiliarity is kind of where we had the mix-up specifically?
Correct, and it was also a sub-driver on that one. The regular driver that would have taken that over was not available that day. She was not in, so we had a sub on that one that didn't know any of the students. Where if the regular drivers, some of them were her normal students that she transported daily, she would recognize a lot of them. This was everything came at once with a spare driver, with a new change that happened, so.
And our substitute drivers given like a roster, like a paper roster that they can go by, or maybe an assistant on the bus to help them?
They get the route sheet, which the stops and the directions that take them from our yard to the school, through the route to the next school, and so on. The regular drivers are assigned, get the stop list of students. That is something we can look at also, as well. Excuse me, yeah, we could look at that with adding that as well to it.
Yeah, I think that driver probably feels horrible, right? And if we arm them with information that they can better do their job, maybe that's something we should look at. And then, I don't know, Mrs. Proudfoot, you asked, I don't know if you got an answer, but do our bus drivers, are they allowed to refuse the purple slips? I didn't hear a definite on that.
They can, but it puts us right back to where we're at, where we're starting the whole process. And if we have enough saying no, they're not going to do it, I'm calling Mr. Molina going, I have to cancel routes. I have drivers that won't jump in to do some extra stuff right now. And I don't want to be in that position. These guys, they get frustrated with these purples at times, but they look at us and they're, I'll do it. And
I think everybody,
They
talking
run
to the
right
bus
up.
drivers, just even today, I think they all want to. I just want to understand and be clear on what the expectations are so that we, from a policy perspective, can make the right decisions. And then, Mr. Molino, I would just say maybe this instance, we can also highlight onboarding the Rave 911 app when that does come online to enhance the communication, because it sounds like, looking through the timeline, we did have a lot of breakdown. People weren't able to be reached, nobody had the right information, so I would like to see us leverage our technology once that comes available, so just as a point.
Thank you, Mr. Toby. Ms. Proud, I did too, but go ahead. You go first. You go first.
I just wanted to, as we talk about compensation and veteran employees, I just want to make sure that it's not happening in an echo chamber. I know what would motivate me, but I don't know what would motivate the drivers. And so I want to ensure that when we talk about, raise in hourly, stipends, like how monthly, quarter, however it happens, I just want to make sure that we are, we're talking about money, compensating them in a way that is motivating for them. I know for me, a stipend is nice, but then by the end of the semester, it's probably not on my mind anymore. So as a person, I would probably appreciate more money weekly than I would a stipend. That's me. I just want to know what, just as you guys come back to us with a plan and the next steps, just ensuring that we're really gathering that data from who we're supposed to be motivating and finding out from them what it is they need or want.
Thank you, Mrs. Proudfit. 2 questions, because I just want to go off kind of a little bit what she said. With that, if it's possible when we are having discussions, and I think you guys said it might be brought back to us in February, if we can include a few of the bus drivers from the bus transportation department in those discussions around compensation. Because I heard earlier that there's no representation for them. So I just want to make sure if that's possible to include them. Ms. Myers, sorry, I'll look to you.
Thank you. President Rooks, members of the governing board, we have had members of our transportation department serve on the budget team in years past. We've had people who've transitioned from Peoria and are no longer employed, and so right now those people have not been replaced, but we certainly are happy, and I'll look to Mr. Sims and Mr. Molino if we'd like to ensure we have 2 people join our team. We've had 1 meeting. I'd be happy to catch them up, and that way those who left, we had 3 before, would have new people replacing them. So we can certainly do that.
I appreciate that, Ms. Myers. Thank you. Last thing, I did want to touch a little bit, I think, on Mr. Toby, diving deep more into what long-term, I know that these are all things that need to be looked at, but short-term, for me personally, just looking at, is it a possibility to look at different outsourcing temporarily until the school year is done? Because I'm concerned about the bus drivers' health, if we have multiple of them calling in sick, health-wise, but then also the student safety aspect. If we are now to the point of we have now misplaced a student because of the situation, I'm just trying to see, is it possible to do a short-term outsource contract at least until May, until we get everything that we are wanting to accomplish in place to get in more, hire more bus drivers. I'm just looking for something temporarily. Mr. Molino.
President Rooks, we will, everything in first phase will start working at the same time, and Mr. Sims and I will reach out to local companies that outsource and provide those services that are on procurement contracts. We will, 1, verify that they have the capacity, how fast they can move, and we will work with Ms. Myers' department in purchasing to do their due diligence on those procurement contracts, and then we would bring those to the board if needed, depending on the dollar amount for the remainder of the year for board approval.
Okay.
If it is under the 100,000 and a commodity, okay.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think the only thing I would just maybe bring up with that is, Dr. Summers, I know I kind of spoke to you for a little bit about this, but I'm trying to find the policy and I don't remember where I wrote it down, but we do have a policy. Nope, different one.
President Rooks, I believe it's DJE.
Yes, and it's the emergency procurement, I believe is the one that you're mentioning, where the direction from the superintendent in the case of an emergency, looking at procurement for that policy language. And so I just wanted to see if that's at all possible with emergency-wise of situation of student.
Thank you, President Rooks, members of the governing board. There is statute and policy in the area of emergency procurement, but that's typically for a natural disaster, roofs blown off during a storm, something along that line. I would say what we're addressing falls within the realm of normal procurement requirements, and I can certainly look to others in this meeting to add to that if needed.
Okay. Ms. Siegel?
I'm new to all of this, so not to the law, but to this board.
Okay.
DJA really, Ms. Myers is right. It is designed for a natural disaster. A labor shortage probably wouldn't fit there because it's something you could have planned for. That said, there are ways to shorten the time period to go through a procurement, but I'm not sure that this qualifies as an emergency. It can be done.
Would it?
But if it's under 100,000, you're.
Okay.
Okay.
Would it qualify emergency under that with the student safety aspect of what kind of transpired at Estancia?
I'm not sure that one incident would qualify. I guess you could justify it and put it in your procurement file so that your auditors can look at it and see if they decide it. It's really up to the auditors who would decide whether they think it's an emergency. I'm not sure that it would pass that muster.
Okay. Oh, Mrs. Ewing, I'll go to you first, and then I think you had a question. Go ahead, sorry.
Just what's the difference in the time frame? So that's what I just need to understand for the, because Ms. Myers, you said that you felt like that we could go through the procurement in a time frame that would be able to meet the needs, and then what does the emergency? I mean, obviously, if a roof blew off, I know we'd have to fix it the next day, right?
Thank you. President Rooks, Mrs. Ewing, members of the governing board, I believe we're probably over the commodity for where you could cover it with quotes, meaning you're at that $100,000 amount that requires formal procurement. There are cooperative contracts that may be available to allow us at the next board meeting to bring that cooperative contract forward. We also are planning to provide an update to the governing board where we could evaluate options related to a compensation increase versus options related to outsourcing or ad hoc outsourcing to make the best, most timely and efficient decision to meet our needs to ensure our students are safe.
Okay, so just what I'm hearing is we have some things that are in place that we can do pretty quickly so that we can help him get the drivers he needs and help get our students to where they need to go.
And the answer, I believe, is yes. And I believe it's been a while since I looked on the Mojave and 1GPA cooperative list of what they are offering, but it used to be that they did offer transportation services. And that way you don't do the procurement yourself.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Ewing. Mrs. Bowles, did you have a follow-up question?
I didn't. That was actually, I was going to go back to you saying not emergency, but there's quicker ways to do it. And I'm hearing you, that's your answer, or is there more? Okay. Thank you. That was my question.
Thank you. All right. If there's no more questions from everybody, okay. I just want to say thank you to the presentation and to the bus drivers that came today. And I want you to know, like, we're going to do these phases. We're going to look at stuff. It is not going to be push down the road, kick the can down the road. we're going to do this. Is very passionate about it, and so I just want to say thank you for coming. And I believe that we probably need to take a 5-minute break before we go into the next thing, just so that we can use the restroom real quick. So we're going to recess for 5 minutes. Thank you.
see that navy blue very much anymore.
All right. We are going to, welcome back from our recess. We are going to move on to 3.2, update on the recent executive order related to Title IX. And I want to thank Mrs. Susan Siegel, our legal counsel, for being here this evening and presenting. So I will leave you to direct.
Good evening, board members. I will try to condense this as much as possible. Let's start off with vernacular. There were rules enacted with regard to Title IX in 2020, so I will be referring to the 2020 rules. And then in 2024, there were rules enacted, and I will refer to them as 2024 rules. So that on January, well, first of all, before President Trump was inaugurated, the federal court in the Eastern District of Kentucky, in a case involving a number of states, vacated and enjoined the enforcement of the 2024 rules. The name of that case was Tennessee versus Cardona, even though it was in Kentucky. So we've got a lot of states involved. It was a nationwide injunction, and it was applied immediately. Then on January 20th of 2025, President Trump issued the executive order defending women. I'm going to need the other document up, please. Defending women for gender ideology extremism and gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government. And that in that order, signed by President Trump and issued on January 20th, the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Ed was asked to provide clear guidance on sex-based definitions, including sex, women, men, male, female, gender ideology, and gender identity, and rescind all guidance documents, including the 2020 rules. The most notable change, if you read this order, and this is just the front page of the order, the most notable change is it eliminated the inclusion of LGBTQ plus students by removing gender identity in the definition of sex. This executive order says it is the policy of the United States to recognize two sexes, male and female. And again, it relied upon the federal district court decision out of Kentucky, Tennessee versus Cardona. Then, just last week on the 31st, now you can go to the other document, the U.S. Department of Education issued a Dear Colleague letter. A Dear Colleague letter is, I guess, analogous to an Attorney General opinion, only it's done by an educator. And this one was issued by the U.S. Department of Education, Acting Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights. And in that, his letter explained the action that was taken by the president on the 20th of January. All of us in the legal community, and I'm sure educators, were left with the big question after the January 20th order: what rules should we go back to? So the most important thing about this letter is it explains that you should go back to the 2020 rules. So you should check whether your governing board has included language to go back to the 2020 rules, if in fact they went to the 2024 rules. I don't think you did. So I think you're in the clear and you're straight on 2020 rules. The 2020 rules are still complex. They have an intentionally high bar for a claimant to prove that there's unwelcome conduct tantamount to sexual harassment. The conduct must be severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. And I guess you would prove this by the old, I know it when I see it, if it's objectively, and maybe other witnesses testifying that it is objectively offensive. Keep in mind that the 2024 rules allowed it to be subjective. So one person's objective is, one person's subjective is the opposite to another person. So they eliminated that and made it harder for a claimant to state a claim against a school district or find that Title IX infraction occurred. The 2020 rules still have a high standard of proof. It's clear and convincing evidence or a preponderance of the evidence if you want to go to a lower standard. Most of the school districts have done the clear and convincing evidence, and I think you probably would want to keep clear and convincing evidence in order to find a violation. Litigation and OCR complaints. Yesterday on February 3rd, the America First Legal Foundation filed a complaint with OCR against, I believe it's 6 or 7 school districts in Virginia over the district's gender identity friendly bathroom and locker room policies, alleging that they violate Title IX. Whether that will get anywhere, I don't know. There's some standing issues. There's some other issues as to whether a policy in the abstract, unless it's followed, violates Title IX. Also, recently, the OCR conducted and is conducting an investigation with the Denver Public Schools. It's a different approach. The allegation is that Denver Public Schools are being should be investigated by OCR because they make a traditional argument not having a sex-segregated girls' bathroom while having a sex-segregated boys' bathroom is sex discrimination. So it's a little bit more narrow of an issue. So the AFL, as I said, the AFL complaint is far broader and seeks to, I guess, cut new ground on what Title IX means and doesn't mean. So I'm available for any questions if you have any. It is at least comfortable that we can go back to some rules that we knew 5 years ago. So.
Thank you, Mrs. Siegel. I'll go to Mr. Toby. Any questions or comments? Unless you want me to come back to you.
Yeah, you can come back. I don't have any at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Bowles.
Because I wasn't on the school board, and I did follow this closely February last year, but prior to that I did not. First I want to ask the obvious question, and that is that really loud? Is that giving feedback? Do we have policies that aligned up with the rewrite in 2024 Biden administration of Title IX? Did we create any? I'm hearing you say no, but do we know that?
I briefly looked at your policy AC. I also have looked at other districts' policies AC, and I don't think you changed AC.
President Ricks, Mrs. Bowles, yes, let me confirm what Mrs. Siegel just said. So we had, I want to say it was late July, an extensive study session. Actually, it was, I'm sorry, it might have been a special meeting. One way or another, we had extensive conversation. There was a presentation at that time. There was also legal advice that was received. The decision from the board, I believe it was a unanimous decision during that meeting, was to continue with the policy language that was aligned with the 2020 rule. So there was no policy shift relative to AC or any other policy that adopted any of the 2024 regulations or rule.
And I would add the other policy service that some districts are using is the Arizona School Risk Retention Trust, and that policy service has policy based upon the 2020 rules.
Okay, I do remember that. Thank you for that
And
reminder.
if you do want to look at the trust policies, they are in section 5.
Can you clarify for the board, section 5, where that would be at? Because I don't know if they have. No, I think she's meaning policy.
I'm talking about the risk retention trust policy
Yeah.
that you have not adopted.
Correct.
It's on their website, and you can also look at a neighboring district, Agua Fria's adopted them, and you can go into their policies. Most people haven't done a variation on the theme, and I don't have that site right now, but I will give Dr. Summers the site.
President Rooks, just echoing Mrs. Siegel, and I think it's fair to say, if I can venture to go this far, that Section 5 of the trust would align to Section A of our current policy manual.
Kind of, no.
Are there there may be other?
Section 5 of the trust goes to students, and I
Oh,
believe it's in
okay.
there.
So there's a-
And discrimination is to students.
Okay.
The trust policy, AC, deals with discrimination towards everyone, and it's somewhat confusing. There's also some trust policies, I believe, in G and others, but Section 5 of the, I'm looking at the Agua Fria ones, is where you'd find discrimination against students.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Siegel. I appreciate that. Mrs. Bowles? Do you have any other
Probably an
questions?
obvious question or even answer, but if our district were to create a policy off of maybe the trust, Arizona School Risk Trust, and to mirror that, or for the employees, because I'm hearing that's for the students, what route would we take? Would that go to Mr. Summers, Dr. Summers, and then to our attorneys?
I can talk to you about this a little bit more than usual because my partner Jennifer McLennan is also in-house with the trust part-time.
Oh, okay.
So I believe she has a meeting with someone here the end of the month. Maybe not.
Yes, actually.
She does.
Well, and this is sort of hot off the press. We have confirmed the trust's attendance at our February 13th
Right on.
regular meeting.
Okay.
So we're.
2 Gus Roosevelt attorneys.
There you go. So that is pending, and certainly, I think the scope of that presentation is more with respect to the board's request to understand how the policy services of the trust work. So I don't know that in that presentation, it would lend itself to a specific deep dive on any of these policies per se. Mrs. Bowles, I'm not sure if that helps answer that.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes, because I'm asking the processes and they'll give us some more information. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Proudfit, do you have any questions?
I do. And these aren't legal advice questions. These are more clarifying questions. And these are the same questions I asked even before the Title IX revision in 2024. When I came on the board, we were looking at bathroom renovations. It opened this can of worms. I want to make sure that I understand in the 2020 revisions, there was no legal precedent to keep boys out of girls' bathrooms or girls out of boys' bathrooms. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, then my second question, which I asked back then, but I still don't feel like I understand this. You know, when we have students register for the school district, they have to provide proof of residency, a birth certificate, an immunization record, unless there's a religious exemption. I still don't understand, even if we go, you know, okay, so now we're reverting back to 2020, which puts us back in the same place we were before. How does the gender listed on a birth certificate play into this? Because if that is the legal document we're asked to go by the federal government, by our state statutes, I don't understand. Like, it seems like the onus should be back on those governments to, do you get what I'm saying? I don't want to create policy that our that's going to ping pong our students around. So with change of administration, I would rather stick to, okay, we use birth certificates, that's it, because it just seems like it's kind of an impossible thing to enforce. And I don't want to give our educators this huge job of enforcing something that is not actually enforceable.
Well, I think I understand your question. Under Arizona law, you're only required to prove residency. I mean, technically, all a student's parents have to produce is a utility bill or a driver's license or something else as far as residency. They do produce birth certificates simply to put down, get the age right and other things, but they aren't required to. I know that most school districts do require it, but by law, they're not required to.
Okay.
That said, you can go by what the birth certificate says as far as categorizing what their birth gender was at that time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it just, as we're trying to create essentially a legal definition for gender beyond, because the 2020 ruling, this isn't like a huge win because now we're back in ambiguity again and need to sort that out. And, obviously we don't want to be opening the district up for liability, and we want to make sure that we're giving very clear direction so our admin and everyone is on the same page of being able to enforce and establish, how we're moving forward as a district. So I guess the rest of my questions will be an executive session about exactly how to accomplish that.
Yes, if you want, yes, that's true.
Thank you.
Or I can send you the citations. Oh, we'll talk in executive session about how you can accomplish that.
Okay. Mrs. Ewing, I'm going to apologize real quick. I did see that we do have one public comment tied to this item, so I am so sorry. So I apologize. Mrs. Nikki Anchaff was filled out a card for public comment tied to this item. So you will have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm actually glad that you didn't come to me first, because I just want to bring up a couple of things from some of the comments that were made. They're talking about reverting to policies prior to 2024 with a 2024 ruling. It took a year to find out there was no prior policy regarding bathroom usage. There still is no policy in place at Peoria Unified School District. And I was told by then Superintendent Reynolds in 2022 that it's just a practice that has been in place for years, which implies even prior to 2020, where students could use the bathroom or facilities of the opposite sex if they insisted upon that. So to say we're reverting to 2020 policy, there was no policy on bathrooms in 2020. And also, when you apply to attend Peoria Unified, you do have to provide a birth certificate, at least as far as you're told on the application, and you select gender for your student, and there are only 2 gender options, male and female, on the application. Okay, and I started coming to board meetings in 2022 because of Title IX, and as I said at the time, the district had no policy regarding students requesting to use opposite-sex bathrooms, and just had an undefined, unpublished practice that allowed students to use opposite-sex facilities if they chose, that most parents and students were not aware of. I worked with now Board President Rooks and many other parents to try to get a policy in place, or at least a copy of the practice that was being implemented readily available for all parents and students. And that never happened. President Rooks introduced a policy in 2023 that was not supported by the board at the time, and we got nowhere. President Rooks continued to ask for the issue to be put on a future board meeting agenda, and it was never addressed again in spite of continued requests from parents and students at board meeting after board meeting. I hope that under the new administration and support from the new board president Rooks, Clerk Toby, and Mrs. Bowles, that the district can put a policy in place that restricts bathroom, locker rooms, and field trip assignations based on biological truth, biological sex, and provides other accommodations for students who do not wish to use the facilities of their biological sex. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment, and I apologize again for missing it. Mrs. Ewing, please continue.
Okay, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, but let me know if these are answers that need to be provided in executive session. So, so first off, I want to point out that students, anyway, I won't go there with the public comment, but in the 2020 regulations, just like Mrs. Proudfit said, is one of the problems is there was no clear guidelines. And even many professionals out there said that they felt like when they put those guidelines together, they could have answered that. And they really didn't on how to separate spaces and how to create spaces for like the transgender or that type of thing. And it didn't really answer it. So going back to the 2020 regulations, we're in that same scenario. However, I thought that part of what President Trump wrote, the Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism, on Section 4, when he identified privacy and intimate spaces, that he specifically outlines that it's basically male or female. So I thought that by reading this, it kind of takes care of that ambiguity, unless what's written in here hasn't been fully vetted for if it's lawful or that type of thing. So that's one of my questions. And then if I can just have you review also you mentioned the second case, February 3rd, America First, and I caught part of it. I didn't hear all of it. I know about the third case with Denver, but I didn't know in terms of the bathrooms what that case was about. So I was just going to have you either repeat what you had said or just provide a little bit more detail on that. And so I'll leave it with those two things, but I do have a few other questions with regards to the interpretation of the bathrooms. And it has to do with that now that we're going back to the 2020 regulations, that from just a couple of calls that I've sat in on, that there are overlaps between Title IX and Title VI. And so with the new, going back to the the 2020 regulations, that there's still the issue that you can have violations of Title VI with regards to harassment and hostility in the workplace and stuff. And so navigating kind of both of those. And so maybe some of that would come up during executive session. And then I had sent a question of if we are allowed to, underneath this agenda item, is to have any conversations about the overlap between Title IX and Title VI, since Title VI wasn't mentioned on the agenda item.
Well, we can talk about an executive session, but I want to give you a little preview. I'm not ready to talk about Title VI. I'm really not.
That's okay.
I just want to do my homework, or the dog ate my homework or something like that. I don't know. So I will be able to talk to you a little bit about the 2020 rules and what they say and don't say. We were all surprised, even under the 2020 rules, but that was a different U.S. Department of Ed, about the idea of allowing the student to go to the nurse's office to a separate single bathroom somewhere in the building. And I would still maintain that that's allowable or should be allowable.
And that's Peoria practice, that they are allowed, so.
Also remember that I think President Trump gave the U.S. Department of Ed 30 days to come up with more guidance on this. So, I mean, our heads have been spinning since the 20th of January because there have been so many executive orders in education. But I'm sure that we will hear something very soon as to more guidance from U.S. Department of Ed. We also don't even know what's going to happen to U.S. Department of Ed because of the other most recent executive order, which is dissolving the Department of Ed, or at least downsizing it substantially.
So I guess that would be kind of a question of, and again, let me know if that's something more in executive session, that is there even enough legal guidance out there to begin to craft a bathroom policy that doesn't put us in the, because that was one of the big things across the entire board, or not, maybe not the entire board, but was that there wasn't legality around the type of bathroom policy that was wanting to be crafted. And so we were, in my mind, I felt like we were very stuck. And so I am curious if, underneath your advice, do you feel like we are in a different place that we can move forward, or is there still so much ambiguity that we need to wait that 30 days or so forth? And I don't know.
Yes, to answer your question, it's the latter. I would wait that 30 days and get more clarification on it.
Okay. Mr. Toby, do you have any questions or comments?
No, just a big thank you for your service, Ms. Siegel, and helping us get our sea legs from underneath us as a board. Your insight's been very valuable.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Enjoyed meeting you, and I hope to meet you more, get to know you more.
Thank you. So I do have a question on his order. It is section 7, looks like letter C. It says each agency head shall promptly rescind all guidance documents. They list a long list of documents. So I guess my question with that is that being rescinded from the U.S. Department of Ed, from all the school districts, or is that then fall on the school district or board to rescind all of those documents that were listed?
President Rooks, I don't believe that President Trump was addressing all school districts. First of all, they don't really have that much jurisdiction over rescinding them. And that's the reason why I believe that this latest lawsuit came about, because people did not rescind them immediately, but it's still undecided.
Okay.
So I would wait the 30 days and see what they have to say about it.
Okay, all right. I know Ms. Bowles has a question. I guess around, let's see, it's on the back of it, I don't know what page number, but looks like it's section 2. It's stated that his administration will defend women's rights and protect freedom of consciousness by using clear and accurate language and policies that recognize women are biological female and men are biologically male. And then it talks into policy and definitions. So I guess it says that they will enforce all sex protective laws to promote this reality. So I guess, is there any guidance there on, I guess, for a governing board?
The answer to your question is I think this is just the beginning. I think that it's clear that the president and the executive branch views only two sexes, which it's pretty clear from here, and it's also clear from the Dear Colleague letter. But beyond that, as to what a school district decides to do, it's not what it has to do. What it decides to do is another issue. Again, when you look at the latest lawsuit, they are disputing whether any gender-neutral or gender identity-based restroom facilities are in violation of Title IX. It's new ground, and you don't even have an answer yet from these 7 school districts in Virginia.
Okay. Last question, and I'll let Ms. Bowles go. Let's see, so it's letter G, section 3. It goes, I see letter G here. It says federal funds shall not be used to promote gender ideology. So I guess around that, could that be interpreted as if we are promoting anything in that category of not doing anything with Title IX, developing a policy or anything like that, if we're if we're promoting the practice, I think it was mentioned under public comment, of allowing boys going into girls' bathrooms or whatever it is, could that be interpreted as promoting that to where we lose our federal funds? I don't know if I'm making sense with that.
Yeah, well, the defined gender ideology is not, it says permitting the false claim that males can identify as and thus become women and vice versa, and requiring all institutions of society to regard this false claim as true. So it's a pretty broad definition, but I, again, would wait the 30 days and wait and see if we get more guidance. But I would not, it doesn't sound like your district has been proceeding in this, in a manner that some other school districts have.
Yeah, I believe what was said was we have not been able to have any type of policy in a handbook for a parent, for a student of this matter. It's just, we discovered it as parents and then was just told it was just a practice. So that's when we talk about going back to 2020, Title IX, we just don't have any clear policy language, I guess, for parents and staff and students. So that's just the only thing I had there. But Mrs. Bowles, I know you had a question, so I will let you ask the question.
I don't even know if I have a question or if it's a statement or probably a little bit of both. What Nikki spoke to is and what Mrs. President Rooks just spoke to is the truth. We don't have a bathroom policy. We know that has been a big issue in our district. And I would have to say from campaigning, and you've heard me say this before, that was the #1 issue. Every time I didn't even have to ask. They would ask me. There will be a bathroom policy after we get legal advice, and I want parents to know that. I do have a question, and I don't know if I'm going to ask this right because I don't know what I don't know. Because I literally just found out today the Arizona Department of Education does not create our policies for the state.
Correct.
Everyone
That's
needs to hear that because they use a group called a board, education board, that are not voted in. And that goes back to our constitution in this state, and it needs to change because they're not representing the people. I'll just leave that alone. But so I do have in my wording Arizona Department of Education because I didn't know it was actually the Arizona Department.
Arizona School Boards
Thank you.
Association.
Yes.
But there's also other entities. You've got to, it's another day, I'll explain, but the Arizona School Boards Association, the Arizona School Risk Retention Trust, and then the other organization, which I can't remember the name of, Pam Kirby's organization.
Arizona Coalition.
Oh, Arizona Coalition. All three have, and then there's a fourth one called, I can't remember the name of it, that the former executive director of Copper State, as it's called, purport to, they purport, the rest of them do model policies for you. They are just model policies. You do not have to adopt any of them. It's just like Robert's Rules of Order. We know what Robert's Rules says and about order for a meeting, but you don't have to adopt them. It's your governance. So while a lot of school districts word for word adopt the Arizona School Boards Association's model policies, a lot of them either reject some or modify them. It's the same way, again, with the trust, although the trust is fairly new and it is far less, it goes to the meat of things. What does govern you, and it's clear, is state statute. You only have the power the state statute gives you. And you could even adopt your own rules if you wanted to, although it would be very labor intensive. So does that clarify it a little bit more?
Yes, actually, I asked that a bit wrong, but thank you because I did need some of the information you just gave us. We have been elected, and I said this in the last board meeting, to create policy. I personally, I won't speak for the other board members, want to learn how to do that well. And I think because we're part of this community, they need to mirror our community. And so with all of these outlets, I appreciate you giving that to me because one of them was Copper State that I didn't have. But going back to policy, bathroom policy, for lack of a better way of saying it, it's much broader than that. Do you know, so let me rephrase my sort of question. The Arizona Department of Education doesn't write policy for our state. The State Board of Education makes policy, and I didn't know that until today. That's a big deal. That's just a really big deal. But back to our policy, bathroom policy, do you know if the State Board of Education allows districts to report data using the gender identity name? Do you know what the law says in Arizona for Arizona Department of Education or State Board of Education? Do they allow us to do paperwork and send it to them with gender identity information?
The short answer is I know nothing of that sort. But there might be something out there that they do allow, but I used to represent the State Board of Ed, and I also, one of my partners, Carrie O'Brien, represented the State Department of Ed, and I just haven't heard of any such rule or regulation.
So would it be fair to say that if we created a policy as a district, that we would allow, because we want to work together, right? That's the point that I'm trying to make, that we would allow the district to only follow the district's policy along with the Arizona Department of Education policies, and that being you use the name that was given at birth, your biological name, and all the things that are coming through Title IX.
It's a loaded question, but I will try to tell you. Your policies have to comply with federal and state law. That's a given. That's, when you took your oath of office, you have to do that. So you'd have to, those are your guardrails, so to speak, as to any policy you adopt. And as to any usually the State Board of Education rules, which are codified under the Arizona Secretary of State's website, you can see them there. The Board of Education rules deal with procurement, finance, curriculum, and teacher qualifications, to name the biggest ones. I doubt that, they have not gotten into male and female bathroom facilities that I know of. And the State Board of Ed, or State Department of Ed, does not have power to dictate policy over school districts.
Okay, that does give me a little more clarification, because I know the Arizona Athletics Association, AIA, when we're talking about sports and overnight trips and all the other things, they do have state legislation that says they do not allow boys and girls bathrooms, boys and girls locker rooms. That is, they go by the biological sex of the child.
That's right.
So that's where I was going with that. I just didn't know. I still don't really know, but I'll do a little more research on that. I just wanted to, bring that up. So thank you.
Mrs. Ewing, do you have any questions?
And I don't know that maybe you'll know this, but I know that one of the things I was thinking about from Mrs. Bowles, it was kind of from something you had mentioned before at the last meeting, is that, and I remember talking to Dr. Reynolds when he was here about, well, how do we even go about drafting? If the board wants to draft a policy, what is the process for that? And we don't have anything in our policies that says this is what we would follow. I've only just looking around out there, know that obviously we would have to want to make sure our policies are aligned with compliance with state and federal and so forth, but we don't have a real clear structured process of actually drafting a policy that the history that I've been here on the board, anytime we've done a new policy or policy revision, it's always come as a result of a new law or a change in a law or that type of thing. And so do you have any suggestions on when this 30 days is up and we're starting to look at policies on of what is a recommended best practices way to go about writing policy? And I don't know if that's outside of the agenda item, so. let me know about that.
I can address some of that in executive session if we have it on this topic today. But, so some of that I reserve, but there are other school districts that have, maybe not in a formal policy, but through the superintendent guidance or others, have given guidelines to it.
I think, just to, yeah, off topic, but I know that there is, Dr. Summers might be able to help with that question. I believe there is policy language around a board member requesting something. Might be they have a policy that they already have drafted or whatever, and then bringing that forward. I think we've already gone through that process with a fellow board member, but I just wanted to clarify that for you. You might be able to answer that or on the side.
I don't have it right in front of me because my computer was on the fritz. But President Rooks, I believe off the top of my head, and it's scary that I can still tell you this at this hour, policy BG is the policy process which stipulates that not just board members, any community member can submit recommended language. Now, the process then that is utilized in order to bring that forward to, an agenda item, and the next steps in that process is also spelled out in section B of policy. So we can talk through that some more. I'll just leave it very high level for now, and certainly I know we're in the middle of a couple that have been brought forward and what some of those next steps are. So we'll continue to shape that, because I think to Mrs. Siegel's point, there's ways that we can really hone in on those guidelines. So we get really clear on the steps that are involved in policy creation, as well as you already know, what it takes to first read, second read, adopt, et cetera. So I'll leave it at that.
And Ms. Ari pointed out, and I agree with her, that when the 30 days is over, there's going to be a plethora of model policies out there. And you can draft your own, or we can build on what other people are doing.
Yeah, because I think I already have seen policies that are already drafted through different organizations that are a lot out there that have been covering this subject for however long we are now. So that is an option as well. Yeah, I agree with that. So thank you, Mrs. Airy and Mrs. Siegel. Mr. Toby, do you have any more questions? I know all of us girls over here are talking, so just checking. No? Okay. All right. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? So I just have one more question, Ms. Siegel. And I'm trying to frame it in a way of, do you believe that there is there anything that can be discussed that isn't, I guess, legal advice on this matter? Like, is it really a necessary thing to have behind doors, or is it, I'm trying to frame it, and I'm not sure how to frame it.
My opinion is that I can talk to you generically without turning it into a legal advice session in executive session. I give enough speeches that are really legal advice to the people that are attending. So I guess what I would say is, you were asking about alternatives. I have seen other school districts in Arizona under the 2020 rules say that if a student requests separate accommodations, that an alternate bathroom, such as the nurse's office, can be used.
Okay. All right. Yes, yeah, go ahead.
So there are a number of reasons why students might want alternate accommodations. Excuse me,
Correct.
Disability being one, mental health being another. Is that, let's solve all the problems, because there's many problems with restrooms. I know we tend to really focus on this one population of student, but the fact is there's lots of bathroom-related issues. Is that something that we could build in so it's a more holistic? I want to make sure as we're creating policy too, that it's not, that it's seen as a solution to a problem in restrooms and not specifically targeting one group of students. When
Transgender,
it's,
yes.
You know, I bring this up all the time, but my son had problems in restrooms. He has autism, and that was, you know, that's my experience with problems in restrooms. And so I just want to make sure we're not opening ourselves up to liability and also solving all the problems.
The answer to, I was trying to be very generic. I think if you have a generic bathroom policy based upon the circumstances, that the parents can request that the student have bathroom privacy or something like that. You could do that.
And we could build in parental involvement into that process for whatever the accommodation would be.
Correct.
But something that might, it would reemphasize parental involvement, but then also
Correct.
Solve a myriad of concerns.
Yes,
Okay.
I believe that that generic qualification is not only possible, but advisable.
And it would hopefully mitigate some of the liability, you know, potential, making us a target of potential lawsuits or OCR complaints that last forever. Okay.
So I have a follow-up question. I guess question, comment, I don't know, I'm trying to process it. I guess for me, it's looking at, because we're focusing on the executive order from President Trump. And in his executive order, I don't see the idea that you're referencing. I see a very clear outline of what he is expecting through his executive order on the subject matter of, you know, it talks about intimate spaces designated for women, girls, or female, designated by sex and not identity. So I just, when we're getting an update from the executive order, that's where my mind goes, is that is the direction that the federal government, President Trump, is looking at, and not what you were kind of mentioning. So like, that's just where, I don't know, I just want to make sure like whatever does happen, that it does, I guess, does keep in mind of the executive order and the federal government. I know you talked about 30 days, but I guess that's just where my mind was going with that.
And I hate to keep pushing this off because 30 days from now, I'm going to be here. It's on the, I don't know what page under the definitions. It says within 30 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall provide to the U.S. government, external partners, and the public clear guidance expanding the sex-based definitions set forth in this order. And I think that bathrooms should be high up on their list, because if you take the number of questions we get as school attorneys, that's high up on the list. And so whether that includes access to single facilities, single-person facilities, I don't know whether it will. I frankly was surprised, even before the 2024 guidance came out, that the OCR, which will probably be dissolved soon, didn't like the idea that we were sending kids off to the nurse's office. So we'll see what guidance we get on that. And if we get no guidance, then we'll go forward and do something that is lawful.
Thank you. I know Ms. Bowles has a question, but I just want to follow up on that. The 20, I mean, he was referencing going back to the 2020 Title IX. Are you able to dive into what that was specifically?
Today, I tried to show you some of the differences between 2020 and 2024. The biggest difference was the definition of sex.
Okay.
And then also the procedural differences as to proving a Title IX violation. Okay. Those were the biggest differences. I want to be a little bit pedantic and tutorial, just without going on too much, but I want to remind you all that the Title IX provision that was interpreted in 2025 said you can't bully a child because of his or her sex, and included in the sex their gender identity or the transgender. What this change does is it removes that. You still can't bully a student. I mean, that's the law in Arizona. But you can't bully, but they've removed the provision about bullying on the basis of gender identity. And so it's a nuance that lawyers love to talk about, but it doesn't, I mean, what you hear is the definition of sex. And that's where that goes. As to the bathroom part, that's an outgrowth of the bullying provisions of Title IX or anti-bullying. And it goes in, and also of the sex harassment.
Okay, so that's the 2020 that you were discussing.
right.
Okay, Mrs. Bowles, go ahead.
I guess to clarify a little bit of that as well, Title IX was specific to not discriminating because of your biological sex. That's the way, where it began. And Title IX particularly only pertains to schools.
Right.
But that wasn't what I was going to say. I just want the public that will hear this, hear me say, yes, we will have a bathroom policy, and of course, we're going to include those children that are confused about their gender. Of course, we're going to conclude them, they're children. And so I hope that answers Ms. Proudfit's a little bit of the question she had around that. It's going to include all, but we're going to follow the law and protect children and bring excellence to our schools.
Mr. Toby, do you have a question or comment?
I have one.
Okay.
Ms. Siegel, the 504 accommodation plan is a current mechanism that we have to accommodate students that have various needs, is that right?
Yes.
And is that a federal right that's been given from the federal government through the Department of Education?
Through the Congress.
Okay.
It's a law that evolved from Congress. And so it's passed down to the school districts because you're subject to IDEA and Section 504. It also, Section 504 isn't just confined to schools, but it's one aspect of it.
So generally speaking, if the Department of Education should either downsize or go away, school districts will still have that since it's from Congress, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
May I add, even if U.S. Department of Ed goes away, the state also enforces Section 504, so.
I have one more question. I'm sorry. It
That's
comes into your
okay.
brain. Okay. I guess it's kind of going outside of the student realm. I know that that's what applies to it. I think it was Section 7, but it's on the back. It's like AB G. I don't know if I'm at the right one, but it just said federal funds shall not be used to promote gender ideology. I did bring that up earlier. How does that apply to, I guess, more of staff versus students? I don't know. Federal
Well,
funds, would that
wish-
apply to staff, or is it just students when we're talking about the executive order?
Well, you've got a state statute that prohibits you from promoting political causes, and I believe a lot of people have interpreted that to be the LGBT rights groups. So I don't know what they would interpret as gender ideology, but I guess if you taught some gender ideology, it would possibly fall within there.
Okay. All right. Sorry, that question came to my head. Just wanted to ask. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? I have one question. Okay, Mrs. Bowles, go ahead.
In line with what President Rooks just said, do you foresee us having to create a policy around employees when it comes to the Title IX?
No, I don't. You have, I don't know, right now you've got ASBA policy, and I think GBEA and all the others prohibit discrimination and also requires you to abide by the laws, an employee to abide by the laws of the state and the federal government. So you've got GBA, GB-R. Now, see what's going to happen if you do adopt other rules. I'm going to have to learn all those again. But you've got a number of rules in Chapter G that deal with conduct of your staff, both certificated and non-certificated, and I think it's covered.
And you're speaking to ethics as well?
That's in GBA.
Okay, that's
We
what
have
I
an
thought.
ethics
Okay,
one for staff, yeah.
thank you.
Does anybody have other questions or comments on this item? Okay, you're gonna then, okay, go ahead.
I know one of the things I was listening to is that going back to the 2020 regulations that 2024 went more in depth on, and that was pregnancy accommodations. And so is there anything, because that piece was taken out when President Trump pulled back the 2024 regulations? So.
Let me see if I'm not trying to speak on a lot of topics tonight, and it's bad when you know a little bit about a lot of things, but the Pregnancy Protection Act it was an act of Congress, and it still applies, if that's what you're asking.
Right, because I think in the 2024, it had went through and expanded on all of the accommodations for any, and this would hopefully be referring to staff as opposed to students, but just it really expanded on the accommodations and so forth. And I just was reading that was something that employers would want to look back at what would be best practices with accommodating those, because those regulations or those accommodations were taken back.
Well, I'll do some more research. You've given me something to think about on that one, but I always have cited the Congressional Act on pregnancy accommodations, which, by the way, is a topic for another day and are very, very broad.
Okay, all right. So we are going to move on then to number 4, executive session, 4.1, convene executive session pursuant to ARS 31-431.03. Letter A, number 3, discussion or consultation for legal advice with attorney or attorneys for the public body on the following: A, legal advice related to the operation of the Transportation Department; B, legal advice concerning the implications of the recent executive order regarding Title IX. So I just need any motion on the floor.
I'd like to do a substitute motion that we not convene executive session pursuant to ARS that you cited.
I will second.
So we have a motion made by Mr. Toby and a second by Mrs. Profit.
My feelings aren't hurt.
And then do you want us to just run through voice vote? Okay, I was waiting for her to get it on the screen. It's okay.
Mrs. Ewing? Yes. Mrs. Proudfit?
Yes.
Yes.
President Ricks?
Yes, sorry, late night, yes.
Mrs. Bowles? Yes. Mr. Toby?
Yes.
Motion carries with 5 yeas. Moving on to section 5, return to regular session. We will then move to section 6, action items. 6.1, board consideration of potential action related to the operation of the Transportation Department. I don't know if any board members have questions or comments on this item. We kind of had it on there just in case if there was any direction that a board member wants to make a motion on the floor or have a discussion on what type of action considering.
Do we need a motion to move forward with the phases that were recommended by Mr. Molino?
No. I do have an action item that I want recorded. We talked about earlier about the, I can't remember the word, the correction action things that we have from, because of the incident on the 27th. So I'd like that to be part of that action, bringing that back to the board, having those dates just so that it is recorded. I know we talked about it earlier, but I would appreciate that on there. Does that make sense? I don't know if I needed to do that. I just want it to be in order, I guess.
If you are wanting that, it would just need to be a motion. If that is one item that you want to have, you just have to make a motion on the floor for that direction to the administration. And then you would need just a second. And this can also be if any other board members have maybe a different direction, adding on to your request, making it like 2 motion items. I'm trying to look to Summers, but I think that's the way that it would look at.
President Ricks, if I followed you correctly on that, what I would recommend, and I know we only allotted just the one item related to one motion, but I would recommend that if there is multiple actions, that we actually have a separate
Item.
motion.
Okay.
And I think the other thing I would just add, because we'll do what we need to do, is that we can also, what I'm anticipating, I think I mentioned this just briefly as we were in recess, is we have everything that has already been shared with us, that we would bring that back forward on February 13th as some additional consideration based on those next steps. So the administration is prepared to do just that. And Mrs. Bowles, I hear you on, you want to make sure there's a record of us responding to the corrective actions that were set forth, and we are prepared to do that as well. So, I mean, if it does the board its pleasure to direct us again, we stand ready to respond to that. But
So I'm just processing it through my brain with what you just piggyback on. Could it be a motion of direction to the administration of all of the things we talked about today, or? Okay. Okay.
that would be, if I heard Mrs. Zeri correctly,
I know, I was trying to hear her.
that direct administration to provide a recap with additional next steps within the February 13th meeting, which we are prepared to do.
Okay.
But my question to that would be, are you even going to be ready yet? That's not really what I'm asking. I really just want, and if you're saying that you have it on record, that's really not what I'm just wanting to do the order that we need to do. So if anybody looks at this, they say, oh, that's when they addressed that. So they don't have to go through 5 hours of YouTube. That's the only reason I said that. So my motion would be that the administration would bring back to the board the corrective actions you've taken regarding, just to start with transparency and follow up and creating a culture, that all the things we talked about, those 5 things, if we can know when you're going to do them, how you're going to do them, and then just revisit when you're done, I guess. Does that make sense? There's 5 action, corrective action, thank you, items, and that's all I'm asking. Like, when, I don't know. I mean, I'm hearing one of them might not be till May, and that's the ID, rolling that out. So I'll leave that up to you. I thought the order, I'll speak to what Dr. Summers said, was to bring it up now. If we don't need to, I'm good with that. Are we clear as mud?
I think we have it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Can I
Mr.
make a
Tob-
motion?
Oh, yes, sorry,
Can
and
I
then I'll
make
go
a-
to him.
can I
Oh,
make a-
Do you have a question, or are you good? Okay, then go ahead, Miss. I just want to make sure you didn't have a question.
I was just going to make a motion that that administration bring back on February 13th, on our next board meeting, their plan to, what's the right wording? What?
Their
A
plan
timeline of corrective action and all right, I can't think, I'm going to take back my order or my motion, because I can't think of the right wording, so, sorry.
Mr. Toby, did you have a motion?
I'm just going to pick up where you left off. I'm just going to pick up where you left off. So I'll motion that the administration proceed with potential corrective action steps and touch base with the board on February 13th as to the status and follow-up of the corrective action measures.
I will second that motion, if that is clear to Dr. Summers.
I'm going to look to Ms. Azure to make sure we have that accounted for.
Yes.
So to read back the motion, motion that administration proceed with corrective action steps and follow up with action taken. Would you like me to add at the February 13th?
Yes, I believe that's what he requested in his motion.
And for clarification, can I get the second on that again, please?
Yes, it was myself. Sorry. So
Thank you.
motion made by Mr. Toby, second by myself, Mrs. Rooks.
I'm going to have her read it one more time. President
Okay.
Rooks.
Motion that administration proceed with corrective action steps and follow up with action taken at the February 13th general board meeting.
Yes. So we will go through a voice vote.
Mr. Toby.
Yes.
Mr. Bowles, sorry, Mrs. Bowles.
Janelle. Yes.
Mrs. Proudfit.
Yes.
Mrs. Ewing.
Yes.
Mrs. Rooks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries with 5 yeas. All right, board members. We are going to move on to 7 adjournment, 7.1 adjournment. I need a motion to adjourn this meeting at 8:48 p.m.
I will motion to adjourn at 8:48 p.m.
I will second.
So we have a motion made by Mrs. Ewing and a second by Mrs. Proudfit. Yes, and go through a voice vote, please.
Mrs. Rooks.
Yes.
Mrs. Ewing.
Yes.
Mrs. Proudfit.
Yes.
Mrs. Bowles.
Yes.
Mr. Toby.
Yes.
All right. And motion passes with 5 yeas. So we are adjourned. Thank you, board members, and thank you, administration.
Thank you.